Chapter 901. After Old Master Mo received the award, Poplar Fruit walked down the stage in a low-key manner. Just like how he walked up the stage not long ago, he did not attract much attention. Only a curious girl was holding up her phone and recording him. Poplar Fruit seemed to have sensed it. The moment he walked down the stage, he looked over with a faint smile. It was like an epiphyllum blooming in the night, so quiet and handsome that it was intoxicating. The girl blushed and put away her phone. However, she could not hold back the joy in her heart. With a tap of her finger, she uploaded the video to the internet, a video website, and Twitter to share with her friends. Poplar Fruit did not know, and she did not expect that the video would be crazily shared after she uploaded it. Many people recognized Poplar Fruit's identity, and even more people were impressed by Poplar Fruit's attitude and translation skills. Furthermore, the video was quoted by many foreign media. After all, this was a story for later. Poplar Fruit had completed his most important task in Sweden. His adaptability also prevented Old Master Mo from changing his mind. More importantly, he ensured that Old Master Mo's wisdom did not fade because of the cultural gap. The vastness and profoundness of Chinese culture and the wisdom of Chinese writers could be perfectly displayed in front of foreigners. However, Poplar Fruit's task was not over yet. For the rest of the banquet, Poplar Fruit accompanied Old Master Mo and helped him translate. Many famous people and scholars from the East and West came over to chat with Old Master Mo. On one hand, they wanted to express their respect, and on the other hand, they were curious about him. Poplar Fruit's strength was once again vividly displayed. Any foreigner that came over could easily deal with him. He alone was equivalent to a translation team from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Even if a dozen translators gathered together, they might not be better than Poplar Fruit. I feel that Poplar Fruit, with you by my side, I have received the treatment of a senior official, Old Master Mo said with a smile. When he chatted with Poplar Fruit in private, he did not have too many scruples. After all, they were on the same side. Teacher, you are overpraising me. Poplar Fruit was a little embarrassed. In the middle of the banquet, there was a small program which was for Old Master Mo to give a speech. Old Master Mo had already written a script for his speech. Don't worry, I'll follow the script this time, Elder Mo said to Poplar Fruit with a smile before he went on stage. In the afternoon, he did not play by the rules. He did not feel guilty towards others, but towards Poplar Fruit, he still felt a little embarrassed. After all, he had caused a little trouble for his disciple. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it's just a translator. Teacher, you know my ability. Poplar Fruit smiled calmly. In the midst of the elegant applause, Old Master Mo, who was wearing an elegant Chinese tunic suit with black velvet and red lining, slowly walked up to the podium. Poplar Fruit, who was still in his tuxedo, took the microphone from the staff and stood upright behind the podium. He did not steal the limelight and quietly waited for Old Master Mo to start. When the audience quieted down, Old Master Mo smiled and began to speak. However, he did not look at the script. Yes, he wanted to start off with an impromptu speech. I'll say something that is not in the script. Poplar Fruit laughed bitterly in his heart. He knew that Old Master Mo was, habitually, not playing by the rules again. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to play his part and translate according to Old Master Mo's words. This time, Poplar Fruit used English translation. In fact, most of the people present could understand English, and Swedish was only the official language of the organizers. It was extremely difficult for people from all over the world to understand Swedish. Previously, during the award ceremony, Poplar Fruit used Swedish mainly to give face to the organizers. Now that the banquet was not so formal, Poplar Fruit used a language that everyone could understand. 2 hours ago, the wife of our school's permanent secretary gave birth to my daughter. This is the beginning of a beautiful story. I believe that those of you who understand Chinese or foreign languages can pass on this news to everyone and express your warm congratulations to him. Old Master Mo said with a smile on his face. To be honest, Poplar Fruit felt that Old Master Mo's speech was not in the script, so he polished it a little and expressed it in more concise English. 2 hours ago. The birth of a life is also the beginning of a beautiful story. I would like to share this story with all of you. and I hope that you can share it with more people to express our sincere congratulations. In China, people might scoff and be unmoved, but overseas, people were deeply moved by the birth of a child. Therefore, after listening to Poplar Fruit's translation, people were not stingy with their applause and blessings. The topic of my speech is the storyteller. Old Master Mo seemed to be a little nervous. Luckily, Poplar Fruit helped him with the translation. Through television or the internet, I believe that everyone here has more or less understood the faraway northeast village of Gaomi. You might have seen my 90-year-old father, my brother and sister, my wife and daughter, and my 1-year-old grandson. Old Master Mo said calmly, but there is one person that I miss the most right now, my mother, that you will never see. After I won the award, many people shared my glory, but my mother could never share it. Poplar Fruit translated these words in real time, and they could clearly see that some of the female guests who were easily moved had tears in their eyes. This was the first story Old Master Mo told, the story of him and his mother. The most painful thing in my memory was when I went with my mother to the collective farm to pick wheat. When the people guarding the field came, the wheat pickers all ran away. My mother had small feet, so she couldn't run fast. When she was caught, the tall guard slapped her in the face. Her body swayed and she fell to the ground. The guard confiscated the wheat we picked and left while whistling. The corner of my mother's mouth was bleeding as she sat on the ground. I will never forget the look of despair on her face. The thing I regret the most was when I went with my mother to sell cabbages. Intentionally or unintentionally, I overcharged an old man who bought cabbages by 10 cents. After I finished paying, I went to school. When I came home from school, I saw my mother, who rarely cried, with tears streaming down her face. She didn't scold me. She only said softly, "Son, you made your mother lose face." Old Master Mo's narration was very plain, but Poplar Fruit's translation was very heavy. He wanted to be as close to Old Master Mo's tone as possible, but he was always affected by his narration. Old Master Mo talked about small things, but it always seemed to let the audience feel the unforgettable memories and longing in his heart. The order of the plot in the previous chapter is different from reality, so please don't think too much about it. Chapter 902. Poplar Fruit had always maintained a devout attitude when translating Old Master Mo's speech. This was because only in this way could he better convey his thoughts. However, Poplar Fruit was still a little lacking, or rather, his life experience was insufficient. That was why he was brought into the emotional content of Old Master Mo's speech. This was not a mistake that a top translator should make. However, to the audience, this did not sound like a mistake. Or perhaps they thought that a person who told such a story should have such an emotional speech. However, in Poplar Fruit's mind, this was a mistake that was neither big nor small. It was an unconcealable flaw in his perfection. A real translator should imitate Old Master Mo's calm expression and tone at this moment, and not create a self-righteous tone to infect the readers. Perhaps the speaker did not want to directly bring about an emotional impact from the tone. Poplar Fruit still needed to continue learning. However, at this moment, with Poplar Fruit's translation, the people in the banquet hall held their breaths and listened to Old Master Mo's speech. They had been deeply brought into the world of Old Master Mo's story. Sometimes, I would imitate the sounds of birds and try to talk to the birds in the sky. Sometimes, I would tell my heart to a tree. But the birds ignored me and the tree also ignored me. Many years later, when I became a novelist, many of my fantasies were written into my novels. Many people praised me for having a rich imagination. Some literature enthusiasts hoped that I could tell them the secret of cultivating their imagination. I could only smile bitterly in response. This was a sentiment that many writers could relate to. Even some professors who had achieved their current scientific research results because of their childhood fantasies or achievements also sincerely laughed for Old Master Mo, just like China's sage Lao Tzu said, "Fortune lies in misfortune, and fortune lies in misfortune." I dropped out of school when I was a child and suffered from hunger, loneliness, and lack of books to read. But because of this, I began to read the big book of social life at an early age, just like our senior writer Shin Kongwen. At this point, there was a sentence in classical Chinese that was a big challenge for all translators. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was prepared. Even if he was not, he could quickly respond and translate it well because he had done research on classical Chinese translation before. Old Master Mo then introduced the creation process of some of his more important works. Some novels originated from dreams, such as The Transparent Carrot, and some novels originated from events in real life, such as The Song of Garlic Flower in Paradise. But regardless of whether it originates from dreams or reality, in the end, it must be combined with personal experience in order to become a literary work with a distinct personality that uses countless vivid details to create typical characters, rich and colorful language, and ingenious structure. Maybe it's because I've experienced a long and difficult life, so I have a deeper understanding of human nature. I know what true bravery is, and I understand what true compassion is. I know that everyone has a hazy area in their heart that is difficult to accurately define good and evil, and this area is the vast world for writers to display their talents. As long as a work accurately and vividly describes this hazy area full of contradictions, it will inevitably surpass politics and have the quality of excellent literature. Poplar Fruit found that when he read Old Master Mo's speech, he was far more inspired than when he listened to Old Master Mo's speech. Perhaps that was the case. Whether a creation originated from a dream or reflected reality, it would eventually return to the category of human beings. Only by having a deep understanding and analysis of human nature, and only by thinking from the standpoint of human beings, could it be possible to write works that could enlighten even the deaf. While translating, he was also learning and reflecting, like a sponge absorbing the creative experience and life insights of a master. All of this was much more valuable than the glory and honor he had gained by standing on such a big stage. Old Master Mo told a lot of stories, some of which were his own scandals, but he still told them without fear. For example, he told the story of a classmate who didn't listen to the instructions and cried while visiting the exhibition of suffering. This wasn't a glorious thing, but Old Master Mo still said it boldly. This incident made me realize a principle, and that is, when everyone cries, some people should be allowed to not cry. When crying becomes a performance, some people should be allowed to not cry. Old Master Mo's concluding speech received thunderous applause from the audience. Of course, people didn't affirm Old Master Mo's whistleblowing, but they affirmed Old Master Mo's honesty and self-reflection. After I won the Nobel Prize in Literature, it caused some controversy. At first, I thought that the object of controversy was me, but gradually, I felt that the object of controversy was someone who had nothing to do with me. I was like a person watching a show, watching everyone's performance. For a writer, the best way to speak is to write. I wrote all the words that I should say in my works. Words spoken with the mouth will scatter with the wind, but words written with a pen will never be erased. I hope that you can patiently read my book. Of course, I have no right to force you to read my book. Even if you read my book, I don't expect you to change your opinion of me. There is no writer in the world who can make all the readers like him. This is even more so in today's era. Old Master Mo said all this in a very calm tone. Just as he said, it was as if he was standing on the side and watching himself, a person who seemed to have nothing to do with him perform. However, his magnanimity had won the admiration of the audience. I am a storyteller. Because of my storytelling, I won the Nobel Prize in Literature. After I won the prize, many wonderful stories happened. These stories made me believe that truth and justice exist. In the years to come, I will continue to tell my story. Thank you. Old Master Mo ended his long speech that lasted more than half an hour with a few short sentences. Although it lasted for a long time, no one was tired of it. They listened attentively to Poplar Fruit's translation. Finally, with warm and long applause, they expressed their respect for an old writer who had worked hard for the literary industry for many years. Poplar Fruit also stood at the back and applauded thoughtfully. The greatest use of literature is that it is useless. The charm of literature is really great. Poplar Fruit said softly in his heart, "Teacher, I also want to be a storyteller." Chapter 903. Nice to meet you, Leon. Poplar Fruit wasn't an important person in the first place. Although he translated for Mo Yen, most of the people's attention was still on Mo Yen and the other Nobel Prize winners. Yang took a break and stood at the side of the buffet area to eat some food. To his surprise, someone greeted him in fluent Mandarin. He turned around and saw a white-haired old man standing in front of him. Poplar Fruit didn't mistake him for a Chinese. After all, he had a Caucasian face. Professor Ma Yueran? Nice to meet you. Poplar Fruit was surprised. He hurriedly bent down and bowed to the old man. The old man was quite tall. However, due to his age, his body was a little hunched. Poplar Fruit bent down and put his head at the same level as the old man. Eh? You actually recognized me? Professor Ma Yueran said with a smile. Did you do your homework before coming to Sweden? Yang smiled and said, since I'm participating in such a grand conference, of course I have to do my homework beforehand. However, I've read a lot of your works and translations when I was learning Swedish, so I know a little about you. He spoke in Mandarin with Professor Ma Yueran mainly because it was Professor Ma Yueran's field. He would be happy to speak in Mandarin with him. Really? Which of my works have you read? Professor Ma Yueran asked with interest. I have read all of your translations, including the 1983 Swedish translation of Bei Dao and Gu Cheng's poem, The Shore and the Spoiled Child. Your academic works include The Responsibility Forms of Interrogative Sentence Structures in Journey to the West, a study of the pronunciation of Western China. Poplar Fruit counted with his fingers and narrated to Professor Ma Yueran. Poplar Fruit's expression was very excited. It was very different from the calmness he had when he was translating. It was because he had met his idol. Poplar Fruit did not worship celebrities, nor did he chase after them. However, he had his own idols, and most of them were in the academic field. Professor Ma Yueran was one of them. Professor Ma Yueran was deeply interested in Chinese culture. He was the one who truly expanded the field of sinology in Europe from archaeology and linguistics to literature, and introduced a large number of Chinese literary works to Europe. It could be said that in terms of cultural dissemination, Poplar Fruit's evaluation of his decades, and even more than half a century of persistent promotion of Chinese literature, had even surpassed greatness. In fact, more than 20 years ago, in 1988, Professor Ma Yueran had always thought that the Nobel Prize for Literature should be awarded to Mr. Shin Kongwen, a writer who had stopped writing since the 1950s but whose works before that were already great enough. Unfortunately, Mr. Shin Kongwen passed away in 1988. Professor Ma Yueran, who received the news, called the Swedish cultural counselor in China. However, the other party did not know Mr. Shin Kongwen. Because of this, Professor Ma Yueran angrily hung up the phone. Professor Ma Yueran even tried to persuade the other judges to make an exception and award the award to someone who had already passed away. However, he did not succeed after many attempts. In the end, the 64-year-old Professor Ma Yueran walked out of the conference room in tears. Whether it was Professor Ma Yueran's achievements or his attitude toward Chinese culture toward Mr. Shin Kongwen, Poplar Fruit had always been in awe of this name. Okay, you don't have to read it anymore. The wrinkles on Professor Ma Yueran's face bloomed. He smiled and said, I believe that you did read what I wrote. I didn't come here to test you on this. I was curious and surprised by your wonderful translation performance today, so I came to see a talented young man like you. You flatter me. Poplar Fruit quickly bowed and thanked him. Actually, I read the speech in advance, so I didn't encounter any difficult problems during the translation. Everyone else wanted to take the credit for themselves, but Poplar Fruit did not want to. He tried his best to explain, as if he was worried that Professor Ma Yueran would misunderstand. Humility. Professor Ma Yueran pointed his finger at Poplar Fruit and said with a smile, Humility is a virtue. I know that you Chinese like to be humble, but in Sweden, you should do as the Romans do and take your own achievements seriously. I, Professor Ma Yueran, have a pair of good eyes. You might have something to prepare tonight, but the translation in the afternoon was all improvised by you, right? Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He scratched his head embarrassedly and said with a smile, Professor, you really have a sharp eye. You're flattering me? Although Professor Ma Yueran was old, he was still in good spirits. He laughed and used a Chinese word to tease Poplar Fruit, just like an old urchin. Haha, Professor, your Chinese is really smooth. Poplar Fruit said with admiration. It's never too old to learn. Professor Ma Yueran mischievously continued to show off his Chinese skills. Although I'm not Chinese, I've lived for more than 80 years. I've eaten more rice than you have walked, so it's not surprising that I can learn better. You, on the other hand, Professor Ma Yueran smiled and said, Leon, I think you're very outstanding. It's not because you've achieved something great, but because you're able to master Swedish and many other languages so well at your age. That's amazing. Although the grammar was very standard, Professor Ma Yueran's speech was a little incoherent. Perhaps it was because he was old. After all, there were not many people in the world who could still stand and speak. I'm very honored to have your recognition, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Languages are my hobby and research direction. It's the same for Swedish. I like this language very much, not only because of its beauty, but also because it has inspired me a lot in my academic research. Poplar Fruit briefly explained his research on translation to Professor Ma Yueran. Professor Ma Yueran nodded and said, Leon, you're really amazing to be able to draw inferences from one example. Today, I just wanted to see a translator who could translate Swedish so well. Professor Ma Yueran smiled and said, I didn't expect to find a future academic. I really hope that I can see the day when you become a new generation of academic masters in China. It was probably very difficult. After all, Professor Ma Yueran was already 80 years old. No one knew the limits of his lifespan. However, it was not certain. If he could live to 99 years old like Master Ji, then there was really hope. When I go back, I'll definitely remember your recognition and expectations, Poplar Fruit said with a slightly serious tone. I believe that day will definitely come. Professor Ma Yueran didn't chat much with Poplar Fruit. He was old and his mental state couldn't support chatting for too long. With the help of his assistant, Professor Ma Yueran left Poplar Fruit with his faith and blessings before bidding farewell to him. Chapter 904. After receiving the award, Old Master Mo naturally did not return to China immediately. He still had 2 days of official activities in Sweden. As the translator, Poplar Fruit naturally had to accompany him throughout the whole process. During this period, Poplar Fruit would call back whenever he was free to take care of Fong Beibei, who had been scolded because of Gan Juanji. Fong Beibei's situation was much better than when she had been scolded by her classmates. On one hand, Poplar Fruit's care and consideration made her feel relieved. As long as her boyfriend trusted her, other people's sarcastic remarks were nothing. On the other hand, for some reason, the arrogant and crazy Gan Juanji had also stopped. From the internet, it could be seen that netizens' scolding of Fong Beibei had decreased a lot. Fong Beibei was also relieved. Fong Beibei still did not go back to class. Although Gan Juanji had stopped, there were still some people who were jealous of Fong Beibei's popularity. Poplar Fruit was worried about his girlfriend's safety and mood, so he asked her to take a week off. Fortunately, Fong Beibei had won the award. The school was much more lenient towards her. If it had been an ordinary student, it would have been extremely difficult to ask for leave. One would even give up on the idea after seeing the complicated procedures. Besides Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit also called Fong Beibei's parents, who had been worried about her. The two old people's attitudes towards Poplar Fruit were still a little complicated. Previously, Kiki had completely rejected Poplar Fruit. Even though they had accepted Kiki later, they were still a little unhappy. Of course, they would not be angry at Kiki, so they could only let Poplar Fruit bear this unhappiness. Fong Beibei's online public opinion crisis had a little impact on the two old people's lives. When they walked on the street, the neighbors they knew would give them strange looks. Although they didn't say it directly, the two old men knew what they were secretly discussing. The two elders were also worried that Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei would break up because of this incident. It was not that they were obsessed with Poplar Fruit, but Fong Beibei could not take a second blow. Besides, if the news of the breakup were to spread, who would dare to take their daughter as their daughter-in-law? Uncle, Auntie, don't worry, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. I'm clear about this. Isn't it just someone deliberately slandering our Beibei? We must be united against the enemy. Fong Beibei was fine, and Poplar Fruit could finally rest assured. Although he did not say that he would let go of Gan Juanji. His main energy at the moment was still on old Mo, and he also had to deal with the entertainment reporters from all over the world who came to find him from thousands of miles away. Poplar Fruit was very popular abroad in early October. The attention of foreigners on Poplar Fruit gradually calmed down because Poplar Fruit himself disappeared. However, less than 2 months later, Poplar Fruit came back. This time, he had changed his appearance. He was no longer the handsome male model with slightly curly hair. Poplar Fruit had turned into a long-legged interpreter in a suit. Especially after the video of Poplar Fruit translating at the award ceremony and banquet was uploaded to YouTube, people finally began to take seriously the words that Poplar Fruit had said before. And these words, that he had his own ideals and his own pursuits, were once beautifully ignored by people. He's still so handsome that I can't breathe. Many female fans from South Korea and Japan replied with strange symbols below. Their aesthetic standards were not much different from the Chinese people's, and they could not help but love Poplar Fruit. They did not hesitate to go to China's social networks and painstakingly register an account. Then they followed Poplar Fruit's Weibo. It was not that Poplar Fruit did not have Twitter, but he rarely used it. The discussions that compared Poplar Fruit to Western top students gradually changed their one-sided evaluation. From the video, other than the fact that Poplar Fruit's education was a little lacking, it seemed that he did have the chance to become a better top student. Although the entertainment reporters were very busy, they won in numbers. Therefore, such a situation often occurred. If Old Master Mo participated in an official event with other Nobel Prize winners, the reporters' interviews would usually be evenly distributed. Old Master Mo would even receive fewer interviews than the others. However, after the awards ceremony, people realized that Old Master Mo was surrounded by too many reporters. Compared to him, the other Nobel Prize winners were not as popular. Of course, they did not know about the awkwardness between Poplar Fruit and Old Master Mo. Old Master Mo was supposed to be the main character, but the microphones were all extended to Poplar Fruit, who was beside Old Master Mo. These were all entertainment reporters. They were originally there to interview Poplar Fruit. Only those who could not squeeze to Poplar Fruit's side turned to ask Old Master Mo, "Old Master, I heard that you're the winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Literature. May I ask, what do you think of Leon? Can he achieve more brilliance on the path of translation and literature than on the path of modeling?" Although they were asking Old Master Mo, they were actually asking questions about Poplar Fruit. Fortunately, these reporters spoke in a strange foreign language. Old Master Mo could not understand them at all, so it saved him from the awkwardness. In order to appease these entertainment reporters who would not give up until they reached their goal, Poplar Fruit later got Old Master Mo's consent and held a press conference with the help of the embassy. They asked a lot of questions, such as when will I return to the modeling stage? After Poplar Fruit came back, he smiled and shook his head. He said to Old Master Mo, "But I told them that I don't plan to be a model anymore." In fact, they also asked a lot of gossipy questions, such as how Poplar Fruit felt about his girlfriend being slandered in China. God knew how they found out about rumors that should only be spread in China. Fortunately, foreigners were more open-minded. They did not think that first love was a big deal, so Poplar Fruit was not angered by them. Focus on your studies. Not only do you have to translate, but you also have to spend some time learning how to write. Old Master Mo reminded him, "Don't just follow me around and think about translating. You should listen to the lectures that I give and the experience that I introduce." Yes, Poplar Fruit laughed. "I also want to be a storyteller. When I go back, I will sort out some of the articles that I have written recently. Teacher, please give me some guidance." "That's a good attitude to learn." Old Master Mo nodded with satisfaction. "By the way, teacher." Poplar Fruit saw that Old Master Mo was happy, so he brought up the matter that Old Master Mo had asked him not long ago. "I know that you must be very busy when you go back. You have to give lectures everywhere. However, since it's a lecture anyway, why don't you come to our school and give a lecture? Our teachers and students have been waiting for you to come for a long time," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "It's not a big deal." Old Master Mo waved his hand and said, After the spring festival, I will see when I have the opportunity to go to Yang City next semester. I will tell you in advance that I will give a lecture at Higashiyama University. I'd also like to see what kind of school Dongshan University is, to be able to nurture you. Chapter 905. Teacher, I won't be joining in the fun with you. The plane landed at Beijing Airport. Although it was early in the night, Poplar Fruit could see the flashing lights of many reporters and interview vehicles through the window. He turned around and smiled at Old Master Mo. After you've attracted the attention of the reporters, Kiki and I will take a flight back to Yangcheng. Kiki, who could finally unbuckle her seatbelt, climbed up from the chair and jumped happily. She imitated her father by placing her arms on the back of the chair to talk. However, the little girl was too short. Even if she jumped, she could not see what was behind the chair. Sigh. Why did I take in such a heartless disciple? Old Master Mo shook his head. Although he sighed again and again, he was still smiling brightly. Although he was indifferent to fame and fortune, human nature was a little vain. Old Master Mo was much better than others. Don't jump around. Get ready to go home later. Poplar Fruit smiled and carried Kiki. Haven't you been missing Sister Bebe for a long time? I want to go home, I want to go home. Kiki shouted happily. She had become more lively recently and seemed to have entered the active stage. She did not care about the environment. Her crisp voice rang throughout the cabin. I'll go first. Old Master Mo smiled and waved at Poplar Fruit. He pulled his suitcase and walked forward. His wife and daughter followed him. Old Master Mo's daughter was much older than Poplar Fruit. She smiled and held Kiki's hand. Kiki, remember to come to Auntie's house with your father when you're free. Old Master Mo returned home full of praise. Standing in the middle of the cabin, Poplar Fruit could hear the noise outside. Perhaps only the country's leaders had the opportunity to receive such a welcome and interview. It would be a lie to say that he was not envious. Although Poplar Fruit was also pursued by foreign entertainment reporters in Sweden, the honor they brought to Poplar Fruit was very little. Caring about your personal life and caring about your honor were two different things. Kiki, put on your clothes. We're leaving. Poplar Fruit wrapped Kiki in a thick down jacket and a scarf. Papa, hug. Kiki didn't like this feeling. Because she was dressed too clumsily, she couldn't even stand properly, so she could only rely on her father to carry her. Poplar Fruit carried his daughter with one hand and dragged his suitcase with the other. He secretly mixed in with the other passengers and left. Up ahead, Old Master Mo and his family were surrounded by layers upon layers of people. They were like dumplings, unable to move an inch. There were also a few scattered reporters who were interviewing some tourists passing by on the same plane. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki, lowered his head, and hurriedly left with his suitcase. He could still avoid the reporters, but if he was entangled with them, he probably wouldn't be able to return to Yangcheng in the middle of the night. Suddenly, Poplar Fruit heard a voice calling out to him. Poplar Fruit? Poplar Fruit, wait, can you answer two of our questions? Poplar Fruit didn't stop walking. He pretended not to hear and turned into the connecting passage. At the same time, Kiki, who had been hiding in her father's arms like an ostrich to avoid the cold wind, came out. Her big eyes looked around and she happily said to her father, Papa, someone is called Poplar Fruit. Fortunately, Yanggua had already hidden in the transfer tunnel, shaking off the reporters who were about to catch up. He turned his head and smiled at Chi-Chi. Don't worry about them. But they're called Poplar Fruit. Kiki suspiciously pressed on her father's shoulder and looked back. If you want to talk to them, you might not be able to go home tonight. Poplar Fruit said to Kiki with a smile. Kiki, do you want to stay in Beijing? No. Kiki immediately felt the same hatred as her father. She hugged her father's neck and used the scarf to rub against her father as she shouted, Kiki wants to go home. It won't be cold when I'm home. Poplar Fruit secretly laughed in his heart. How can it not be cold when I'm home? He heard from Fong Bebe that Yangcheng was also cold because it rained twice during winter. Poplar Fruit sat on the plane back to Yangcheng. The news of him escaping from the reporters was exposed on Weibo. Although this news wasn't eye-catching, and the headlines in the country were all about old Master Mo's return, there were still many netizens who paid attention to Poplar Fruit who cried out that it was a pity. Poplar Fruit's fame overseas was too great. Furthermore, there were netizens overseas who posted videos of Poplar Fruit calmly translating old Master Mo's speech without a script. When this video was reposted, it was worshipped by a group of fans. Although there were some who doubted that Poplar Fruit had already translated the speech, this doubt was quickly dispelled by another video. This was a video of old Master Mo being interviewed by a reporter. Poplar Fruit was also translating. Whether it was English, Swedish, Spanish, French, German, Asian languages, Korean, etc., he could easily translate them all. A student from Beijing University who studied languages sighed, "This person should only exist in the heavens. It's rare to see someone like him in this world." Poplar Fruit's Weibo followers increased by a lot. This time, a large proportion of them were high-quality and educated fans. This was a rare phenomenon in the era of entertainment to death. This didn't seem to affect Poplar Fruit because Poplar Fruit was sitting quietly on the plane, watching an in-flight movie with Kiki. He was preparing to return to Yangchang after watching a pleasant goat movie. However, this seemed to have a strange effect on Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit thought that he had only informed Fang Beibei, and Fang Beibei insisted on picking her up at the airport. Poplar Fruit was afraid that it wouldn't be safe, so he asked Song Jiwen and Chen Anlin to drive her over. However, this was only Poplar Fruit's assumption. In a newly rented hotel apartment in Yangchang, Zhang Yujie had just finished showering. She was lying on the bed, scrolling through Weibo on her tablet. As she scrolled through, she saw the news about Poplar Fruit. When she saw the photo of Poplar Fruit hugging Kiki and sneaking away, Zhang Yujie smacked the bed and laughed without caring about her image. "He's already so old. He's still so naughty." Zhang Yujie shook her head. Under her shirt, her long, bare legs gently hooked over and kicked her perky butt. "This direction must be a turning point, right? Is he coming back to Yangchang overnight?" Zhang Yujie looked carefully at the photo. When she called Poplar Fruit's phone, it was already turned off. "It must be." Zhang Yujie checked the nearest flights from Beijing to Yangchang. She muttered to herself, "Coming back in the middle of the night? Can you get a taxi? It's not safe to bring a child." "Forget it. I have nothing to do at night anyway." Zhang Yujie sat up and stretched lazily. Her shirt pulled up, revealing her cute little belly button. "I'll pick you up. I can also try out the new car. This was going to be fun." Chapter 906. We're here. Kiki fell asleep on the way back to Yangchang. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but take a nap with his daughter in his arms. When the stewardess woke him up to fasten his seatbelt, he looked out the window at the brightly lit city. Yangchang was already beneath him. After getting off the plane, Poplar Fruit put on his hat and sunglasses and walked close to the wall. He looked around vigilantly, worried that there would be reporters. Luckily, there weren't any. However, when he arrived at the arrival gate, Poplar Fruit's scalp went numb. It wasn't because he saw reporters, but because he saw something even more terrifying. Two women walked towards him at the same time. The one on the right was Fang Beibei. Because of the incident on the internet, she looked a little haggard. However, wearing the same down jacket as the one on Yangguo's body, her thin body was hidden in the thick clothes, making Yangguo feel pity for her and want to immediately integrate her into her arms. The one on the left was Zhang Yujie, whom Poplar Fruit didn't expect. What the hell? Why did this sister come out of nowhere? I didn't tell her when I was coming back, right? And she was dressed so beautifully. Dark purple trench coat, red skirt, black stockings, and high heels. She didn't look like a celebrity with her sunglasses. She looked more like a powerful queen. With her figure and appearance, she would be the center of attention wherever she went. She walked towards Poplar Fruit with a cold aura. Poplar Fruit was scared witless and almost ran away. "Bro, you're on your own now." Song Jiwen stood at the back and didn't walk towards Poplar Fruit like Fang Beibei. He looked at Zhang Yujie, who was a few steps behind Fang Beibei, and swallowed hard. He recognized Zhang Yujie at a glance. When this big sister queen came to Yangcheng last year, she had completely suppressed him in terms of both her words and her aura. Song Jiwen thought that Poplar Fruit had fallen under Queen Zheng's whip. When Poplar Fruit suddenly said that he was in a relationship with his junior, he couldn't believe his ears. Now she appeared again. Was this the classic scene of a queen versus a queen? Song Jiwen started to worry about Fong Beibei. What are you talking about? Qin Anlin asked curiously. Let's watch the show, Song Jiwen said. Uncle. Fong Beibei didn't notice Zhang Yujie, who was walking over from the right. She only had eyes for the travel-worn Poplar Fruit. She quickly walked over and threw herself into Poplar Fruit's arms. She rested her chin on Poplar Fruit's chest and looked up at him with a sweet smile. Poplar Fruit hugged his girlfriend and forgot about Zhang Yujie. He intimately pushed the suitcase and wrapped his left arm around Fong Beibei. Then, he bent down and lowered his head, resting his forehead on her. Fong Beibei's eyes were as clear as water, while Poplar Fruit's eyes were, Aya. You didn't wipe your eyes when you were sleeping, Fong Beibei giggled. She reached out her right hand and gently pushed Poplar Fruit's head up. She wiped the corner of his eye and brushed away the hard little thing. Ahem. Poplar Fruit looked at her in annoyance. She ruined the good atmosphere. Hee. Is Kiki asleep? Fong Beibei hugged Poplar Fruit and avoided Poplar Fruit's hand that was rubbing her head. She even tiptoed and looked at Kiki, who was sleeping on Poplar Fruit's shoulder. Ahem. Zhang Yujie, who was ignored, had mixed feelings. Although she had thought that she would definitely see Poplar Fruit in Yangcheng, she really didn't expect that her heart would hurt so much when she saw it for herself. Zhang Yujie spent nearly an hour driving from the city center where she lived. Then, she aimlessly went from one airport to another. This time, she spent more than an hour waiting. Her feet hurt from all the walking. Zhang Yujie hated herself for wearing such high heels just to see him. She even regretted coming over to see the man she had waited for so long holding another woman in his arms. Poplar Fruit heard the sound and suddenly remembered that Zhang Yujie was here. Fong Beibei also looked over. She pushed Poplar Fruit in a daze and said, Uncle, let's stand to the side. We're blocking other people's way. Poplar Fruit looked at Zhang Yujie with a bitter smile. Zhang Yujie's face was calm, but her eyes were stubborn as if to say, even if you chase me away, I won't leave. Poplar Fruit sighed in his heart. He let go of the suitcase with his left hand and turned Fong Beibei around. He looked at Zhang Yujie and forced a smile. Baby, let me introduce you. This is Zhang Yujie. I've mentioned her to you before. She's not only my friend, but also my boss. She's the big boss of New Translation Road Publishing House. She just came from Beijing a few days ago. Fong Beibei opened her mouth slightly and looked at Zhang Yujie. Poplar Fruit said to Zhang Yujie, Yujie, this is my girlfriend, Fong Beibei. She's also my junior. By the way, why are you here? Are you going on a business trip somewhere? This question was simply a blatant lie. Anyone could tell that Zhang Yujie's clothes were meant to be used to pick someone up, but he really didn't know why Zhang Yujie was here. Fong Beibei's expression was a little nervous. Zhang Yujie's fashionable dress and curvy figure gave her too much pressure. So big? Fong Beibei looked at Zhang Yujie's bulging chest with some envy and some vigilance. Thinking of her own bean sprout-like figure, she couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. Fong Beibei was looking at Zhang Yujie, and Zhang Yujie was also looking at Fong Beibei. She frowned slightly and sighed in her heart. So young, so pure. Poplar Fruit. You damn lullicon. Why didn't you meet me 10 years ago? Back then, I was also a little beauty with a child's face. The scene became strangely quiet. Poplar Fruit scratched his head, not knowing how to deal with this situation. So, you're Fong Beibei. Zhang Yujie smiled. She saw Poplar Fruit's embarrassment and sighed in her heart. She stood up and said, You know me? Fong Beibei asked nervously. Her nervousness was not only shown in her expression, but also in her actions. Subconsciously, she hugged Poplar Fruit tightly. I know. How could I not know? Zhang Yujie smiled and said, Everyone in the country knows that you're Poplar Fruit's girlfriend. I'm sorry, I didn't inform Poplar Fruit beforehand. When I saw the news that he was back, I drove over to pick him up. I didn't expect you to come too. If I knew, I would have gone to pick you up first. Zhang Yujie said with a smile. We two women can talk together. I have brother Mosquito and sister and Lan to send me over. Fong Bebe pouted and said in a low voice. Poplar Fruit, who was familiar with his girlfriend's habits, knew that the baby was unhappy. Chapter 907. In the end, Fong Bebe was still too young. Facing Zhang Yujie, who seemed to be completely superior to her in both figure and temperament, she was suddenly at a disadvantage. Not only did she feel like crying, but she also almost lost her balance. If it weren't for Poplar Fruit holding her tightly, Fong Bebe would have lost her support and fallen to the ground. Poplar Fruit frowned and said, Okay, don't stand here. Mosquito and the others are still waiting for us across the street. Zhang Yujie felt that Poplar Fruit was unhappy. She felt a little wronged. I didn't do anything. Why are you angry at me? I came to pick you up out of kindness. Am I wrong? However, Zhang Yujie was very strong-willed. She took a deep breath and pretended not to see Fong Bebe's hostility. She smiled and said, Is that so? That's great. I haven't seen Mosquito in a long time. Do you still live across the street? Fong Bebe turned to look at Poplar Fruit and felt like crying. She pouted her little mouth and seemed to say, Why does she know so much? At this time, Poplar Fruit seemed to understand something. He held Fong Bebe's hand and squeezed it. He smiled and said, I don't live there anymore. I moved near the school and live with the baby. Fong Bebe was suppressed by Zhang Yujie and seemed to be unable to speak. Poplar Fruit had to speak for her, indirectly declaring his sovereignty on behalf of Fong Bebe. Fong Bebe, who was easy to coax, suddenly changed from teary eyes to smiling eyes. She felt the warmth of Poplar Fruit's palm, which made her feel a lot more at ease. When she arrived at Song Jiwen's side, Zhang Yujie smiled charmingly at him. Her red lips, which were lightly painted with lipstick, curled up at an angle. Song Jiwen, on the other hand, took 2 steps back without any backbone. It was not that Zhang Yujie was too beautiful, but Zhang Yujie was too scary. When they lived at Poplar Fruit's house, Song Jiwen was bullied by her to the point that he had a shadow in his heart. Hey, what are you afraid of? Chen Anlin helped Song Jiwen up and smiled unhappily. She was not as unconfident as Fong Bebe. Little Chili was not afraid of anything. Other than her mother, no woman in the world could control her. Who is this? Song Jiwen, your girlfriend? Zhang Yujie looked at Song Jiwen and Chen Anlin with a mischievous smile. With Zhang Yujie's eyesight, how could she not see that Song Jiwen and Chen Anlin were not a couple? But she just wanted to tease him. Otherwise, how could she express the depression in her heart that was provoked by Poplar Fruit? No, she's just a friend. A friend. Song Jiwen quickly clarified. Oh, right. Her name is Chen Anlin. Little did he know that his long-winded clarification in Chen Anlin's eyes was like an explanation that he was worried his sweetheart would misunderstand. Chen Anlin was inexplicably unhappy. She patted Song Jiwen and motioned for him to move aside. You're Zhang Yujie? Chen Anlin was a little like a delinquent girl. She half raised her head, mainly because she was not tall enough, and snorted, I heard you're from the capital. What are you doing in Yangcheng? Chen Anlin opened her mouth. Her Mandarin was much better than Song Jiwen's. At least even if her words were harsh, to Zhang Yujie's ears, it sounded a little like her own local accent. It was very comfortable. After all, the capital and Jin City were not that far apart. Zhang Yujie did not mind Chen Anlin's provocation. She smiled and said, I'm now in Yangcheng and Poplar Fruit's publishing house. I'll be staying in Yangcheng in the future. Little sister Anlin, from your accent, you seem to be from Jin City? Yes, she's from Jin City. Song Jiwen rushed to answer. He almost blurted out the next question. Since you're in Yangcheng, where are you staying? Still at Old Guo's? Poplar Fruits? Still? The atmosphere at the scene seemed to have frozen. Chen Anlin glared at Song Jiwen as if to say that he had touched the pot that did not boil. Fong Bebe also opened her mouth. She looked at Song Jiwen in disbelief and then turned to look at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit felt a headache. Although he could say that he had a clear conscience, he was worried that his girlfriend would be jealous. Therefore, there were some things that he did not dare to say. But, Mosquito, do you have to trick your teammate like this? Chun Anlin spoke first. What do you mean by staying at Old Gua's? Big brother Yang's house is so small and he's staying with Bebe. Is this a place where he can stay? Besides, it's not like big sister Zheng Yujie can't afford to stay in a hotel. I'll explain to you when we get back. Poplar Fruit lowered his head and whispered into Fong Bebe's ear. He raised his head and smiled, yes, and the place where I used to live is now for Anlin. Yujie, where are you staying now? When I came, you were still in Sweden. There's no need for you to worry. Zhang Yujie smiled charmingly. Her appearance made Fong Bebe nervous again. She said, I've already rented a hotel apartment in the new city. Every inch of land in the new city was expensive, and renting a place was even more expensive. However, Zhang Yujie did not care about that small amount of money. She just wanted to live comfortably, safely, and conveniently. Biting her lower lip, Fong Bebe finally mustered up her courage. She puffed out her chest and said, So it's like that. It's not far from us. Big sister Zhang Yujie, if you're free, you can come to our place to eat. Uncle cooks, and his cooking is delicious. Eating was a lie. Telling Zhang Yujie that she needed her permission to eat was the real truth. Fong Bebe held Poplar Fruit's hand and told herself in her heart, Don't be afraid. Even if I'm nothing compared to her, I have Poplar Fruit. Uncle loves me. He's my boyfriend, not yours. How could Zhang Yujie not understand Fong Bebe's thoughts? However, understanding was one thing, but her heart could not help but ache. Thinking back when she came to Yangchang, she said that she did not want to stay in a hotel, so he gave her the bedroom and went to sleep on the sofa. When she was drunk and unconscious, he was so honest that he did not seem like a man. Not only did he not take advantage of her, he even prepared porridge for her. Zhang Yujie still remembered that although Poplar Fruit was as dumb as a block of wood, his thoughtfulness and gentleness made her, who despised men for more than 20 years, let down her guard. The breakfast he prepared for her, the food he cooked, it was really delicious. She wanted to be pampered by him for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, in the blink of an eye, his arms were already occupied by another woman, and she was in front of her, smiling and telling her that she was welcome to be a guest at their house. She was just a girlfriend. Why did she already put herself in the position of the hostess? Zhang Yujie suddenly felt very stifled. For the first time in front of her love rival, she fell silent. In the end, she forced a smile and forced herself to maintain her swaying aura, saying, Okay, next time when I come over, Bebe Mimi, open the door. Fong Bebe was still too young. She originally had the upper hand, but Zhang Yujie's words made her nervous. Her brain was like a pile of paste. How could she tell that Zhang Yujie was just forcing a smile? She was still worried. If Zhang Yujie really came, how could she face her? Fong Bebe faintly felt that whatever Duan Shueching Shiji was just a fleeting cloud. She was her biggest love rival. How could Zhang Yujie not feel the same way? Chapter 908. Poplar Fruit didn't know how he got home. Anyway, dealing with the relationship between Zhang Yujie and his girlfriend had already exhausted Poplar Fruit. Compared to his high IQ and super memory, Poplar Fruit's EQ was a bit low. In the short 10 minutes at the airport, Poplar Fruit felt that he had used up more energy than translating a literary work with hundreds of thousands of words. In online novels, the male protagonists of those authors have women on both sides, and they even have a harem. It's really nonsense. Poplar Fruit lamented. Women are so troublesome. It's only me and my baby who are pure and innocent. How nice. After putting Kiki, who was sleeping soundly, on her small bed and covering her with the quilt, Poplar Fruit couldn't find a reason to hide in the bedroom, so he braced himself and walked out. Fong Bebe didn't change her clothes. She sat cross-legged on the sofa and looked at Poplar Fruit with her mouth pouted. For words were written on her face. I'm not happy. Poplar Fruit walked over and poured a glass of water for her. He held her little hand and asked with a smile, "Baby, are you thirsty?" "I'm not thirsty," Fong Beibei said with her mouth pouted. "Then are you hungry? I'll cook noodles for you." Poplar Fruit said fawningly, "Don't ask me if I'm hungry. Do you still love me or not?" Fong Beibei went crazy. She threw herself on Poplar Fruit and slapped him. "We're talking like we're rehearsing our lines." Poplar Fruit laughed and hugged his girlfriend's waist. However, he didn't tie her hands and let her vent her dissatisfaction. Okay, of course I love you." Poplar Fruit did not wait for Fong Beibei to become impatient again. He smiled and said, "When did I not love you? Then what's the matter with Zheng Yujie tonight?" Fong Beibei asked with a pout, "Didn't I mention it to you before?" Poplar Fruit said, "First of all, you have seen her photo, and I told you that she is my friend and the boss of my publishing house. Have you forgotten? But you didn't say she was so beautiful and you didn't say she liked you." Fong Beibei said unhappily, "How can I say that someone likes me?" Poplar Fruit pinched Fong Beibei's face, but she shook her head to avoid it. He had no choice but to say, "If I said that, wouldn't I be showing off? There are a lot of fans online who want to marry me." "You're showing off." Fong Beibei bit her lower lip and said, "That's different. Okay? She came to pick you up, in front of me." Okay, don't be angry. Didn't I make it clear? I didn't tell her that I was back. I told you the whole world. If it weren't for the reporters, she wouldn't have known that I was back." Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "You know, you're the only one in my heart. My mother said that you men always say one thing and mean another," Fong Beibei said with a pout. "Okay, don't think about her anymore. She and I are innocent. We are just friends, as good as mosquitoes." Poplar Fruit held Fong Beibei's hand to his mouth and kissed it. He said, "Whether I say one thing and mean another, how I treat you, don't you feel it yourself?" Fong Beibei was stunned for a moment. She thought that Poplar Fruit was unhappy. She quickly shook her head and said, "It's not that I don't believe you, but didn't Brother Mosquito say that? She used to live with you. I don't feel at ease." "That's true." Poplar Fruit smiled. Seeing that Fong Beibei was nervous again, he explained, "At that time, I didn't know her yet. In order to persuade me to join the translation team of Steve Jobs' biography, she came from Beijing and waited at my door. After discussing with her, it was very late." Poplar Fruit said, "In the middle of the night, I didn't know where to find a hotel for her, so I asked her to sleep in my room, and I slept in the living room. You know the layout of my house. It's very big." "And then?" Fong Beibei asked. "Then she came again. She went to find Mr. Mo Yen to discuss the publishing rights of his book. I went with her. At that time, I met Mr. Mo." Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "This time she came. Because she didn't stay for long, she also stayed at my place." Fong Beibei was very jealous. She sat on one of Poplar Fruit's thighs, and her slender hands were grabbing the zipper of the down jacket. "But you have to have confidence in me." Poplar Fruit took Fong Beibei's hand again and said with a smile, "I didn't do anything to her. I'm such a pure person." Fong Beibei chuckled and patted Poplar Fruit's chest, saying, "You say you're pure? Oh, uncle, you're so shameless." Although she was still a little angry, Poplar Fruit felt relieved when Fong Beibei laughed. He began to feel that Fong Beibei was getting easier and easier to coax. She was not like before, when she would be unhappy for a long time because of a small matter. Poplar Fruit didn't know that, in fact, it was because the two of them had been through several storms since November. Fong Beibei was getting to know him more and more, so she was more and more relieved. "I brought you a gift." Poplar Fruit took out a simple and exquisite wooden box from his suitcase and handed it to Fong Beibei, saying, "Come and see what it is. Don't bribe me with a gift. I'm still angry." Fong Beibei pouted and muttered, but she still took the box. She held it in her arms and didn't want to open it. Poplar Fruit reached out and opened the lid for her. She only saw a thick piece of flannel inside, and on top of it was a crystal-clear woman's crown. Wow! Fong Beibei's eyes became crystal clear. Every girl has a princess dream, and such a beautiful crown was what she wanted most when she was a child. It's really made of crystal. Poplar Fruit laughed. I saw it in a jewelry store in Stockholm and wanted to buy a crown in a country where there is still a king. Maybe I can really buy a princess crown back for you. Fong Beibei had already covered her mouth. She was so surprised that she couldn't speak. Do you like it? Poplar Fruit took out the crown, helped her put it on, and asked gently, I like it. When Fong Beibei raised her head, the shyness in her eyes couldn't be concealed. She nodded slightly, blushed, and said, Uncle, do you think it looks good? Poplar Fruit pretended to look at her. Fong Beibei was a little embarrassed and wanted to lower her head. You're quite beautiful, but you're wearing clothes like a country bumpkin. Baby, are you Princess Cinderella? Fong Beibei first took off the crystal crown on her head and carefully put it in the box. Then, with a cry, she jumped up and threw herself at Poplar Fruit. You're Cinderella? You're the country bumpkin. Chapter 909. Poplar Fruit came out of the shower and walked into the living room while wiping his hair. He saw Fong Beibei sitting on the sofa, dozing off while hugging the blanket. No wonder Fong Beibei was so sleepy. It was already past 12 o'clock at night. Normally, Fong Beibei would be asleep at this time, but today, because Poplar Fruit came back late, the two talked for a while, and it was already 12 o'clock by the time they finished showering. Baby, why don't you go back to sleep if you're sleepy? Poplar Fruit took the wooden box from her hand and put the crystal crown worth more than 100,000 renminbi on the coffee table. I just dried my hair and was waiting for you, Fong Beibei said tiredly. She stretched out her hands and asked for a hug. Poplar Fruit pulled the blanket away, reached out to her ankles, and easily carried her up. Fong Beibei's arms were around Poplar Fruit's neck, and she snuggled in Poplar Fruit's arms. Poplar Fruit knew that it was very cold in winter. Although the house was air-conditioned, after lifting the blanket, Fong Beibei's body would be exposed to the outside air. He hugged Fong Beibei's body tighter. Back on the bed, Fong Beibei hugged him and lay down on him like a kitten. Poplar Fruit pulled up the space blanket that he had changed into and smiled. Go to sleep. I saw that you were thinner than before I went out. You need to take care of your body. Poplar Fruit avoided the question of Gonjuanji. After all, this matter hurt Fong Beibei too much. Since it was over, Poplar Fruit already had a plan. Poplar Fruit did not intend to mention this person in front of his girlfriend. Fong Beibei suddenly used her elbow as a support and her palm to support her chin. She looked at Poplar Fruit with her big watery eyes. What are you doing? Poplar Fruit asked in amusement. Say, you men, do you all like big ones? Fong Beibei pouted. Because her chin was propped up, her voice was somewhat muffled as she asked. What big? Poplar Fruit asked, puzzled. Fong Beibei sat up straight. She pouted and gestured in front of her chest. It's that guy from today. Her boobs were already so big. Then, when I went out, I saw many men secretly looking at her. Poplar Fruit understood. He laughed and said, Are you exaggerating? She shouldn't be as old as you said, right? Fong Beibei just gestured the size of half a basketball, which was really exaggerated. Zhang Yujie was indeed a lot bigger than Fong Beibei, but it was not to the extent of being cumbersome. You haven't touched it. How do you know it's not that big? Fong Beibei unhappily said. Although she said so, she was still very nervous. She was afraid that Poplar Fruit would blurt out, I have touched it. It's just a visual estimation. Poplar Fruit hooked Fong Beibei's neck and hugged her to his chest. He smiled and said, Okay. Stop fooling around. Then you peeked. Fong Beibei patted Poplar Fruit's chest and snappily said, You still haven't answered me. Fong Beibei moved her head to the pillow. She looked sideways at Poplar Fruit and asked, Do you men like big? This should be a serious academic question. Poplar Fruit seriously thought about it and then said, Not necessarily, right? Research has shown that the beauty of a woman's chest is composed of at least 15 aspects, such as arc, model, bean shape, and so on. A big chest is not necessarily good. If it's sagging, it may not be good. If it was Song Jiwen who answered this question, he would definitely disdainfully say, A big chest is not necessarily good. But if it's not big, it's definitely not good. Only Poplar Fruit, at this time, would think of the sentences in the literature he read before to explain to his girlfriend. Aya, you're so annoying. Fong Beibei really liked Poplar Fruit's trick. She slapped Poplar Fruit's chest, then covered her mouth and giggled. Then tell me, is mine good? Fong Beibei blushed and said with a voice like a mosquito. Good. Babies are beautiful everywhere. The most beautiful thing in the world is a baby. Yongguo's answer to this question was very quick, almost without any hesitation. Hee hee, is that so? Fong Beibei said with a smile, but I think I'm small, not small. Poplar Fruit pretended to be surprised, raised his head and said, this size is the best. AI. Fong Beibei bit her lower lip and said shyly, how do you know the size? Have you seen it? No, I guessed it. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, baby, don't think too much about this. If you're healthy, everything will be fine. I don't care. Fong Beibei pouted, shook her head and said, I want to drink papaya milk. You have to cook it for me tomorrow? Okay. I guarantee that when baby wakes up tomorrow, there will be papaya milk to drink. Poplar Fruit said resolutely, Uncle, you're so nice. Fong Beibei smiled and hugged Poplar Fruit's arm and whispered coquettishly, ahem. Poplar Fruit coughed and said, baby, actually, if you want to get bigger, there's a better way than drinking papaya milk. What way? Fong Beibei asked in surprise. There's really no woman who doesn't care about her own figure. Touch and grow bigger. Poplar Fruit held back for a moment, made up his mind and said, swear to God. Poplar Fruit is really not such an impure person. It's just that his recent work required him to read a lot of online novels, causing him to be infected by the wretchedness of online novels. Cute? Fong Beibei did not understand and asked. No, it's touch and grow bigger. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and explained, it means that if a girl's boyfriend touches her more, it will be easier for her to get bigger. It's obviously you who wants to touch, isn't it? Fong Beibei's cheeks flushed. She pinched Poplar Fruit's arm muscles and said coquettishly. Poplar Fruit quickly explained, there's a scientific basis for this. Touching, it's easier to promote blood circulation and promote the growth of that thing inside. Then it will get bigger. Actually, you can touch it yourself. Poplar Fruit lowered his head in embarrassment. For a long time, Poplar Fruit did not hear any movement from Fong Beibei. She did not even hit him. Poplar Fruit was nervous. He raised his head and was about to apologize. But what he saw was that under the dim yellow light of the bedside lamp, Fong Beibei's face was flushed red. Her hair was messy, and she was biting her lower lip. Her beautiful appearance was like that of a newly married bride whose red veil had just been lifted by the groom. Uncle, do you really want it? Fong Beibei was too embarrassed to say the next verb. She blushed and looked at Poplar Fruit with her big watery eyes. It seemed like it was a very important moment. Poplar Fruit took a deep breath and did not say anything. He only nodded slightly. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's eyes met. The shyness in Fong Beibei's eyes and the affection in Poplar Fruit's eyes almost dyed the whole room an intoxicating pink. Poplar Fruit only felt that his big hand was grabbed by a small hand from below, through a thin layer of cloth, across warm and smooth skin, to the high ground that he had yearned for day and night. Chapter 9-10. Poplar Fruit's return this time was even busier than the last time he came back from Paris and America. After all, his trip this time, in the words of the principal who came to greet him, was representing the country and the school. In the past 2 days, he had been attacked by a few leaders in the teacher's office. Poplar Fruit finally sighed and said to the teacher, it's true that people are afraid of fame and pigs are afraid of being fat. You have to learn to get used to it. Chun Zongdai sat firmly in the principal's seat and smiled faintly. He said, in this system, there are always many things that are not up to you. Since you can't resist, you have to learn to make use of it. Poplar Fruit nodded and smiled. It's okay, I'm getting used to it now. Not just getting used to it, I'm emphasizing making use of it. Chun Zongdai didn't just treat Poplar Fruit as his disciple. He also saw Poplar Fruit as his own child. His teachings to Poplar Fruit were not limited to academic matters. I know you want to concentrate on academics, but this world is no longer an era where you can build a car behind closed doors. If you put in a little effort to deal with interpersonal relationships, it will help you achieve twice the results with half the effort. Chun Zongdai said with a slightly serious tone, just like Su Kai-jin, if it wasn't for him speaking for you in the Department of Education, how could you have gotten into the top 10 universities in the country? Chun Zongdai smiled and said, don't look at how famous you are outside. If they don't want to recommend you, they will naturally have 100 reasons to say that you can't do it. The results of the award are out. I didn't even pay attention to it. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and asked embarrassedly, not yet, but it should be close. With the people from the Department of Education recommending you, this won't be a problem. Moreover, you have enough qualifications. Looking at your reputation after coming back from abroad, it would be unreasonable if this award wasn't given to you. Chun Zongdai smiled and said, seeing that Poplar Fruit didn't seem to care, Chun Zongdai knocked him and said, don't look down on this award and think that it's just an undeserved reputation. If you get a few more awards, it'll be easier for you to do anything in the future. Even if the school doesn't give me face, they will still give you a lot of help for the honor of this award. Chun Zongdai said with a smile. Really? Poplar Fruit asked happily. The school's support really made a big difference. Previously, they could only squeeze into a rented room in Poplar Fruit. Later, they had an activity room to store their equipment. Later, they could freely apply for the school's empty classrooms as their activity room. If the support from the university was greater, like the previous official graduate student support mission, Poplar Fruit could also fight for more honor or credit benefits for his caring members. Didn't Vice Principal Zhang ask me about your remote teaching situation just now? Chun Zongdai smiled and said, you should be mentally prepared. He might visit you after New Year's Day. Yang Guo was stunned for a moment before she nodded seriously. Don't worry too much. Vice Principal Zhang is not a big bad wolf. Chan Zongdai deliberately used Kiki's favorite cartoon to make fun of him. He has a good impression of you. He won't nitpick on you. Okay, I won't lecture you too much. Chun Zongdai waved his hand and said, go do what you need to do. Yes, yes. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, I still have a lecture in the evening. I'll take Kiki home to rest first. I almost forgot that you have a lecture tonight. Chun Zongdai rubbed his chin and said with a flushed face, dress more spirited tonight. Many people will appear, including Vice Principal Zhang who came today. Teacher, you're also going to support me, right? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. I'm going, but do you still need me to support you? Why do I feel that you're several times more popular than me? Chun Zongdai laughed. After leaving the outer court building, Poplar Fruit raised his head and looked at the sunshine outside. The cold winter made the sunshine extra precious. At this moment, the sky was cloudless. The only thing that was about to come was the warm noon sun, which was the most comfortable enjoyment of the day. The sun shone through the treetops. Poplar Fruit's pupils slightly shrank, as if a ray of light flashed through his eyes. Walking at the crossroads of the school, in front of him was Chun Zongdai's house. Kiki was playing with her brothers and sisters. She might have been looking forward to her father's arrival. However, Poplar Fruit did not plan to pick up his daughter now. He firmly turned to the left and slowly walked out of the campus. The outside of the campus was bustling with people coming and going. It was so noisy that it was like another world. Poplar Fruit took out a mask from his coat pocket and covered half of his face. From his bag, Poplar Fruit also took out a hat that was hidden under a book and covered his eyes. Poplar Fruit took out a small bag from his bag and stuffed it into a crack in the wall that few people could see. After changing his appearance, Poplar Fruit took a deep breath and gently spat out 2 words, "Game start. Game start." After enduring for a long time, after secretly experimenting in Sweden and planning for the past 2 days, Poplar Fruit finally found the best opportunity for revenge. Flagging a taxi, Poplar Fruit got into the back seat. He clenched his fist and coughed. Nanyue Medical University's 6th affiliated hospital. Driver, please drive faster. I have an appointment with a doctor. If someone knew Poplar Fruit was here, they would definitely be startled. Is this really Poplar Fruit's voice? Although Poplar Fruit's acting was ordinary, he had covered his face. So even if his acting wasn't good, no one would think that he was acting. However, in the field of language, this was Yang Guo's strong point. The Mandarin he spoke at the moment was not as standard as he usually did. Not only was his accent serious, but it also carried a strong flavor of Nanha province. Anyone would think that he was a person from Nanha province who came to Guangdong province to make a living. Listening to Poplar Fruit's voice, there was even a stuffy feeling. No one knew how Poplar Fruit managed to imitate it. Okay. The driver laughed. He skillfully stepped on the accelerator and pulled the lever, and the car sped out. Nanyue Medical University's 6th affiliated hospital wasn't far from Gon Juanji's residence. It was only 2 streets away, and Poplar Fruit did not intend to take a taxi to his destination. For the rest of the journey, Poplar Fruit intended to walk over. After giving the driver cash and change, Poplar Fruit walked into the hospital like an ordinary patient. He first entered the building's toilet and flipped his double-sided sweater over, revealing the grayish-black side. Since he was moving during the day, Poplar Fruit did not have to wear any weird night clothes. He zipped it up and wore the hoodie. Although this looked very strange, in the hospital the patients were all strange. Some of the patients with skin infections were also like this. People were already used to it. He then swaggered into the building from the elevator. All the surveillance cameras in front of you are static. Don't worry, Fat Dragon shouted. Poplar Fruit took off his headphones and said in a low voice, I know. Don't be noisy. It's so annoying to hear all this noise in my ear. Poplar Fruit had to keep calm at the moment. Although it was the first time he had done something bad, and Poplar Fruit didn't think it was a bad thing to avenge Fang Beibei, Poplar Fruit didn't feel the slightest psychological burden. It wasn't that he hadn't seen blood before, and after practicing martial arts, his mentality had changed a lot. Han Fizi said, heroes use martial arts to break the law. Most people who practiced martial arts had bad tempers, and they often drew their swords at the slightest disagreement. Moreover, they thought highly of themselves and didn't care about the ordinary laws at all. Poplar Fruit was already considered good. He still maintained his simple nature. Except for when something happened to the people he cared about, he generally didn't choose to mess around. This was just like when Poplar Fruit was arrested and sent to prison. After he came out, he didn't personally cause trouble for Gushida. On the one hand, it was because Gushida was punished by the law. On the other hand, it was because Gushida didn't touch Poplar Fruit's reverse scale. After going up to the 17th floor, Poplar Fruit swaggered out and came to room 1706. The video surveillance shows that he hasn't come out today, Fat Dragon said. It should be as we thought. His habit is to sleep until the afternoon. Poplar Fruit nodded and looked around. Can you open the door and go in? Fat Dragon asked. No, it's a password lock. I don't have the tools. Poplar Fruit whispered as he pulled on the window in the corridor. My head hurts, Fat Dragon said gloomily. Why don't you knock on the door? No one will see it anyway. Just deal with it and leave. No. Poplar Fruit's words were accompanied by the whistling of the wind. What's that sound? Fat Dragon asked in confusion. He suddenly remembered something. They had done this before. Fruit, did you climb outside the building? Fat Dragon was scared out of his wits. He shouted, Fruit, are you crazy? This is the 17th floor, not the 5th or 6th floor. Don't be noisy, Poplar Fruit said, holding his breath. It was windy outside in the winter. The wind outside the dozen floors was like a knife. Fortunately, he was still wearing a mask. Be careful, be careful. Fat Dragon covered his mouth, but he still whispered in a trembling voice. Poplar Fruit ignored him. He couldn't hear him clearly. Only Poplar Fruit was brave. He pinched the outer edge of the window and slowly moved to the side. Fortunately, the more he walked, the wider the space he could put his feet on. In the end, Poplar Fruit held the outer edge of the building frame with one hand, and then reached out with the other hand and grabbed the railing of the balcony. The balcony here didn't have an anti-theft net. They probably wouldn't believe that someone would climb in from the outside at a height of more than 60 meters. Phew! Poplar Fruit took a deep breath. His right hand pressed on the railing of the balcony, and then his legs kicked. His whole body soared into the air. Using his right hand as a fulcrum, he gently jumped and landed on the balcony of room 1706. There's no camera. Fat Dragon said to Poplar Fruit through the camera of Poplar Fruit's phone to find out the situation inside the room. Poplar Fruit calmly took off the shoes on his feet. He only wore socks, pushed open the screen door of the balcony, and walked into the room. The smell of cigarettes and alcohol in the room had faded a lot, but there was still a smell. Clothes and bottles of alcohol could be seen everywhere on the floor and sofa. It was obvious that the owner's nightlife was decadent. There isn't a second person. Poplar Fruit turned around the living room and stood at the open bedroom door. His eyes were fixed on the naked man lying on the bed. This was the first time he saw Gon Juanji. In order to confirm the target, Poplar Fruit took out his phone and looked at his photo, which was provided by Fat Dragon. Gon Juanji's appearance was not bad. He had the kind of appearance that girls liked. He was even more charming than Song Jiwen. He was thin and tall. From his back and buttocks, he looked like a guy who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Moreover, he was too indulgent, and there was a sense of deficit. Originally, I had already let you go. Poplar Fruit stood at the head of the bed and looked at Gon Juanji, who was sleeping soundly without any sense of crisis. He sighed in his heart. Who told you to hurt the person I love the most again and again? In your next life, be a good person. Like a huge shadow, Poplar Fruit reached out to him. Looking for monthly votes. Looking for recommendations greater than over equal to, / Chapter 9:12. Retracting his hand, Poplar Fruit calmly put on his gloves. The emotions in his eyes didn't seem to have fluctuated. At this moment, he seemed to be more like the cold-blooded killer that he encountered with Alan in the United States. During the mission, he had already sealed off his emotions. How is it? Is it done? On the other end of the headset, Fat Dragon was holding the microphone in fear. He lowered his voice and called out. Just like the stupid thief in the movies. His voice was so funny. Yonggwa coldly glanced at him again, then turned around and left. When he turned around, the naked man lying on the bed behind him groaned and scratched his back. He changed his position and continued to sleep. Because of the heater, the quilt was kicked to the ground by him. Fruit? Fruit? Heavenly King covering Earth Tiger? A begonia suppressing pear blossom? It seemed that if Poplar Fruit didn't say anything, Fat Dragon wouldn't let it go. He continued to whisper with a trembling voice. Suppressing your head. Poplar Fruit walked to the balcony and couldn't help but yell at him in a low voice. Don't be noisy. Okay, you're busy. Fat Dragon shrunk his head and closed his mouth. Poplar Fruit returned the way he came. He climbed through the window and returned to the corridor. He then took the elevator to the parking lot on the second floor. Along the way, Poplar Fruit swaggered. However, no one met him in the elevator. This was his luck. I'm gonna pull out the phone. It's time to leave. Back downstairs, Poplar Fruit's mood recovered a little. He wasn't as cold as before. He could also discuss with Fat Dragon how to deal with the aftermath. Pull it out. It's okay. I installed a program in the background of the monitoring system. After you pull out the phone, it can last for 15 minutes. So, after plucking it out, hurry up and run. The Fat Dragon nagged. Got it. Poplar Fruit nimbly pulled out the spare phone and put the cover back in place. He then bypassed the parking lot management staff and left the parking lot through the electronic card reader. All right, I'm out. Poplar Fruit whispered to Fat Dragon in the Bluetooth headset. Next, I can handle it myself. You can go back and play with your wife. Poplar Fruit's mood seemed to become better, and he began to joke with Fat Dragon. Hey, wait! Fat Dragon shouted anxiously. Gwa, you haven't told me the results yet. Have you dealt with him yet? It's done. You don't have to ask anymore. Just forget about it. Okay? Destroy everything. Poplar Fruit said. After this, We'll still be the same as before. Hee hee. Okay. I understand. Fat Dragon grinned and hung up the phone. Poplar Fruit walked forward until they reached the hospital. Once again in the toilet, Poplar Fruit broke the Bluetooth headset, crushed it, and threw it into the toilet to flush it. The phone was disassembled. Except for the SIM card and some basic motherboards, Poplar Fruit didn't hesitate to break and crush it. He took it back and packed it in a plastic bag and stuffed it into the trash can. He changed back to his original clothes and left the hospital. Poplar Fruit was still the same as when he came. He called a taxi and let the car drive him to the residential area near Higashiyama University. When the taxi was far away, Poplar Fruit flashed into an alley. He stuffed his mask, hat, and the inside and outside sweater he wore today into a plastic bag and threw it into the trash can. As for the SIM card and motherboards, Poplar Fruit crushed them into pieces and scattered them all along the way. Clapping his hands, Poplar Fruit returned to Higashiyama University. Gently tiptoeing, Poplar Fruit took back his backpack and changed into his usual jacket. He naturally went to buy some vegetables and calmly walked through the school gate. After throwing away all the items just now, Poplar Fruit seemed to have deleted what he had done in the past hour. His face returned to its usual bright and sunny smile. Sometimes, when a handsome person walks on the street, he's like a street lamp in the dark. Although he's very low-key, you can't help but notice him. A non-famous web writer once said. After walking a few steps on campus, Poplar Fruit was surrounded by a group of girls. Poplar Fruit Sr.? Poplar Fruit Sr. One of them was so excited that tears streamed down her face. Hello, hello. Poplar Fruit, who had never put himself in the position of an idol, hurriedly bowed and greeted them. Why aren't you in class? Oh no, it's noon now. Hee sorry, I should be asking why aren't you in class? Poplar Fruit Sr. is so cute. The girl who saw Poplar Fruit crying just now almost fainted from Poplar Fruit's cuteness. Poplar Fruit Sr., can you give me an autograph? A short but cute-looking girl held a notebook and looked at Poplar Fruit with admiration. Hey, I'm not a celebrity idol. Why are you asking me for an autograph? Poplar Fruit embarrassedly took the notebook and signed his name. He didn't write any artistic characters, just a delicate regular script under the ballpoint pen. Because your story is very inspirational. My daughter clenched her small fist and said, I will definitely become someone as awesome as you in the future. She said it as if there was a big age gap between them. Well, anyway, thank you for liking me. Poplar Fruit took the notebook and signed it while saying, but I have to go back to pick up my daughter. So, let's call it a day? By the way, I have a lecture in the small auditorium tonight. It's free of charge. If you're interested, come and listen, okay? Really? What time? I want to go. Several girls said excitedly. It starts at 7 o'clock in the evening. If you don't have class, come over. Poplar Fruit smiled and waved goodbye to them. In fact, Poplar Fruit saw that when he said evening, several girls couldn't help but stiffen. They should have class tonight. However, Poplar Fruit didn't intend to persuade them. After all, college students are at an age where they have the freedom to choose. It's hard for them to listen to other people's advice, just like Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit also wanted to persuade them not to treat him as an idol. But just now, he didn't see any of the girls obediently listening to him. After leaving, Poplar Fruit wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Just now, he was being pestered by these girls, which made it difficult for him. If he were to meet more irrational fans outside of school, wouldn't he have no chance to escape? One must know that Poplar Fruit now has more than 4 million fans on Weibo. Until now, Poplar Fruit was still worried about having too many fans. He didn't realize that these fans, for him, were actually a very good resistance. At this moment, Poplar Fruit naturally wouldn't think about these complicated problems. He wanted to pick up Kiki, and then go to the library to pick up his girlfriend. Since coming back, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe had a new breakthrough that night. The two of them were more and more glued to each other like knees, wanting to be close to each other. And, I miss my baby. Chapter 9:13. Goodbye, Grandma. Goodbye, brother and sister. Kiki held her father's hand and politely waved goodbye to Poplar Fruit's teacher's wife and her friends. The little fellow was dressed very cute today. She was wearing a down jacket that was not very clumsy. She had 2 small braids, and the headband on both sides of her head and the headband on her forehead were embellished with tiny flowers. She looked like a flower fairy who had become fatter. Then, she also received the same childish response from her little friends opposite her. Poplar Fruit carried the vegetables in one hand and Kiki in the other. Walking on the school road, he asked with a smile, "Kiki, what did you play with your brothers and sisters this morning?" Kiki hopscotch. She danced with joy, as if she did not feel tired after playing for the whole morning. She still happily said, "Kiki jumped farther than my brother. So much farther." The little fellow opened her arms, but she felt that it was a little exaggerated. It was not that far, so she withdrew a little and then withdrew a little. No matter how she moved, it was not to her liking. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "No way? When did hopscotch compete to see who can jump farther? Don't you have to jump from square to square in hopscotch? Did Kiki jump too far and then lose?" Kiki pouted and said unconvinced, "Papa is so bad. Say Kiki lost." "Then you say it yourself, don't you? Children should be honest." Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Humph, Papa is bad. Kiki doesn't want to play with Papa." The little fellow was unwilling to admit her failure and deliberately turned her head. "Kiki wants to play with Sister Bebe. By the way, call Sister Bebe down." Poplar Fruit smiled and handed the bag of vegetables to the hand holding Kiki. Then he took out his mobile phone, opened WeChat and said to the phone, "Baby, I picked up Kiki and came back. Are you in the library? Come down and let's go back together." "Hey Papa, Kiki wants to speak too." Although Kiki had used WeChat's voice communication function before, she was still very excited when she saw it. She bent down and grabbed her father's hand that was holding the phone. "All right, I'll let you play with it. Don't move around, or you'll fall." Poplar Fruit steadied himself and hugged Kiki. Then, he raised his phone and said, "Press it yourself." Just like her father, Kiki scratched her head and carefully recalled the function of the WeChat walkie-talkie that she had played before. She pointed at an icon and turned to ask her father, "Papa, should I introduce one? This is for adding pictures. The one on the left that looks like an antenna is the one talking." Poplar Fruit gestured with his chin. Although she didn't know what the antenna looked like, Kiki heard the word, left, and pressed it. "Speak." Poplar Fruit smiled. "Kiki. Hello?" Kiki still pretended to want to audition. Finally, she began to get to the point. She half shouted and half screamed, "Baby, Papa is calling you home. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha." The little girl mischievously imitated her father and called Bebe's sister. Then, she couldn't help but laugh at herself. This laugh was really childlike and brilliant. It made this somewhat cold winter become warm. Kiki also said that Daddy is bad. Poplar Fruit took back his phone and walked forward with a smile. He pretended to blame and said, "Later, Sister Bebe will definitely say that Kiki is too naughty and doesn't know how to respect others. She's not cute at all." No. Kiki's little feet stepped on her father's waist and twisted up and down on her father's body. She said unwillingly, "Kiki is very cute. Kiki is the cutest." Ding dong. Poplar Fruit picked up his phone and raised it to Kiki. He smiled and said, "You don't believe me? Look," Sister Bebe replied. "She must be here to teach Kiki a lesson. Come and listen." Woo. Kiki raised her 2 small hands and covered her eyes. She shook her head and said, "Don't listen. Don't listen." He didn't know why she covered her eyes. Could it be that she was Kiki's version of deceiving oneself? However, Batty Daddy had already pressed play. "Okay, I'm coming down now." Fong Bebe seemed to still be in the library. He could hear her footsteps coming down the stairs. She lowered her voice and said, "Uncle, where are you?" So he wasn't here to teach Kiki a lesson. Kiki's little hands that were covering her eyes secretly pulled down, and her 2 big eyes secretly peeked out from between her fingers. "I'll be right there." Before Poplar Fruit could finish replying, he received another voice message. "Aya, it's Chi-Chi talking, right? Fong Beibei might have walked to a place where she could speak freely. She said with a smile, "Why are you learning from your father? Kiki, Sister Beibei is telling you your father is very, very bad. Don't learn from him. It wasn't over yet." Fong Beibei turned to Poplar Fruit and said, "Uncle, did you teach her?" Well, she didn't blame Kiki. Instead, she shifted the blame to Poplar Fruit. "I really didn't teach her." Poplar Fruit helplessly waved his hand and stood in front of Fong Beibei and said, "Humph. It's the father's fault if the son doesn't teach." Fong Beibei took over Kiki so that Poplar Fruit's hand could be slightly free. However, Fong Beibei immediately hooked her arm in. She held Kiki with one hand and intertwined her other hand with Poplar Fruit's arm. Their fingers were even intertwined. "Why did you come to pick us up so late today?" "I'm hungry." Fong Beibei giggled and said greedily. It was indeed not early. It was already past 12 o'clock. Even if they went back to cook, they would only start eating after 1 o'clock. Kiki knows that Papa was scolded. Grandpa-chan is with Papa. In the morning, Kiki and a few of her friends secretly took the master's wife's mobile phone to call Poplar Fruit. She couldn't wait to share the news with her sister Beibei. "It's not that I was scolded. In fact, several school leaders came to see me. Later, the teacher told me some principles of how to conduct myself." Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei, who was a little worried, and said with a smile. He touched Kiki's little head and said with a smile, "Kiki might have misunderstood." Kiki didn't. Kiki pouted her little mouth, turned her head and said, "Grandma told Kiki." Fong Beibei covered her mouth and giggled. Back home, Fong Beibei put Kiki down and let her play with Goldie, who was very happy to see the little master come back. She went into the kitchen, washed her hands and prepared to help Poplar Fruit prepare lunch. "What are you thinking about?" Fong Beibei turned around and saw Poplar Fruit, who was wearing his apron halfway and then looking at her in a daze. Poplar Fruit's somewhat absent-minded eyes suddenly focused. He looked at his girlfriend affectionately. Although she didn't wear makeup and didn't pay much attention to her appearance, this gentle and cute girl with messy bangs on her forehead was the girl he wanted to protect forever. "I missed you." Poplar Fruit boldly pulled Fong Beibei's wet little hand, turned around, and blocked the kitchen door with his body. "I haven't seen you for a few hours. I missed you so much. Do you want to do something bad again?" Fong Beibei's cheeks were dyed red by Poplar Fruit's affectionate eyes. She shyly reached out and pinched the soft flesh on Poplar Fruit's waist and said reproachfully, "It's broad daylight, and Kiki is still here." Fong Beibei said softly, "Then let's leave the bad things for tonight and kiss now." Poplar Fruit pressed Fong Beibei's soft shoulders and whispered into her fine, fluffy ears, "Kiss, kiss." Fong Beibei's body went limp from Yongguo's whispers. She murmured, and the emotions in her eyes almost melted into water. They were watery like two pearls that belonged to the sea. Poplar Fruit took another step forward, held Fong Beibei's soft waist with one hand, and gently lifted Fong Beibei's chin with the other hand. He said tenderly, "Baby, I love you." Fong Beibei put both hands on her boyfriend's waist as if she was drunk. Her eyes were a little blurry and she wanted to respond, "I also..." Oh, the kitchen became quiet. "Thank you to the readers at Chidian for your tips, and thank you for your monthly votes. Although I won't get any awards, Xiao Han is still very grateful. Because at least the ranking is higher, and more readers will read Xiao Han's book." Chapter 9:14. When I was in Sweden, I met a bus driver who spoke with a very bad accent. The small auditorium of Higashiyama University was shabby, but it was also the first choice for many famous people to give lectures. On one hand, the building had an ancient and traditional history. On the other hand, the location was special. It was located on the central axis of Higashiyama University. It was like a beautiful sea-stabilizing needle. Behind it was the motto and emblem of Higashiyama University. When Poplar Fruit was an undergraduate student, he sat in the small auditorium countless times to listen to other people's speeches and watch other people's award ceremonies. He never thought that one day he would be able to stand on this stage and give an impassioned speech. He was very calm, facing the students that filled the small auditorium and facing the 2 rows of university leaders who came to support him. Poplar Fruit acted like he usually did in class. He spoke with confidence and assurance. Because it was a group of relatives and friends, Fong Beibei and Kiki also sat in the front row. She was embarrassed to sit with the principal and teachers, so she changed to sit in the student union area. Fong Beibei was also a member of the student union. Although she didn't have much interaction with the student union, after all, they were all young people, so it was not awkward to interact with each other. She looked down at Kiki and found that the little girl was staring at her father on the stage. At this time, the little girl was sleepy and yawning, but now she was still energetic. If there was a Best Audience Award, Kiki would definitely not let it go. She was more serious than the most serious student, and she didn't even blink her eyes. Kiki, can you understand what your father is saying? Fong Beibei turned Kiki around and teased her. Chi-Chi reluctantly turned her head back to look at her father, and then turned her head back. She puffed up her cheeks and said very righteously, Chi-Chi doesn't understand. Fong Beibei understood the stories that Poplar Fruit told, but she didn't understand some of the linguistic theories that Poplar Fruit sometimes inadvertently said. Although Poplar Fruit stopped very quickly, not only was everyone not confused by Poplar Fruit's words, but they also felt that Poplar Fruit was very mysterious. After all, many of the students present were not from the outer court. Even if they were from the outer court, they wouldn't be able to keep up with the professional knowledge that Yangguo was talking about even if they weren't graduate students or doctoral students. Since today's lecture was for the general public, Poplar Fruit would be more popular and tell stories to everyone, and be a spiritual mentor. I don't understand. Why are you still so serious? Fong Beibei let Kiki hold her fingers and asked with a smile. Because Papa is very powerful. Kiki said with a look of admiration. Kiki's Papa is the best. The little girl used these words over and over again. But if Poplar Fruit heard his daughter's praise, he would definitely be happy. Shoo! Fong Beibei pressed Kiki's small lips and said with a smile. Lower your voice. Don't let your father hear it. Otherwise, who knows how many days he will show off. Below the stage, Fong Beibei and Kiki were secretly playing with each other. But Poplar Fruit did not know. At this moment, his mood was not calm. Although he had been smiling and talking about his prepared speech, and from time to time had a brief interaction with the audience, but in fact he was multitasking, and his other mind was not here for a long time. The official start is at 7:30, I said an hour, and it's almost 8:30, right? It should be at this time. In the spiritual world where no one could see, Poplar Fruit frowned and thought, can it work? Poplar Fruit was not completely sure because it was the first time he used it, and he did not have a real human test. Back to the time when night had just fallen. Gon Juanji came to the nightclub he frequented most, and the valet ran over and greeted him. Brother Ji, you haven't been here for a long time. Wow, you got a new car? Hee, I'm free today, so I came out to have fun. Gon Juanji threw the key to him and smiled in a good mood. Give me some thoughts? Don't scratch it. This car was given to him by his father as compensation for being grounded. Got it. The valet chuckled. Entering the nightclub was not completely lively, but the heater was on. Gon Juanji unbuttoned his jacket, walked to the bar, lit a cigarette, and chatted with the bartender there. Because his family was rich and powerful, and he was generous, everyone was very polite to him. How? I haven't been here for a few days. Are there any good new goods? Gon Juanji asked while smoking. The bartender, how, made him a glass of ice blue and fiery red ice and fire as if he was performing acrobatics. He inserted a small olive strung with a toothpick as decoration and handed it over. Then, he received 2 tips and replied with a smile, yes, yes. Where is it? Gon Juanji was not in a hurry to drink. He held the cigarette in his mouth, looked around and asked, Brother Ji, don't be so anxious. The bartender, How, laughed. They seem to be white-collar workers. They won't be here so soon. Wait a little longer. They should be here around 8 o'clock. White-collar? Interesting. I'll wait. Gon Juanji licked his lips and smiled wretchedly. He extinguished the half-finished cigarette in his hand, picked up the wine glass that was barely enough for 2 mouthfuls, and prepared to take a sip. Oh! Suddenly, Gon Juanji felt his heart palpitate. He was not afraid of anything, but his heart really shook. He could not help but cover his chest and frown. "Brother Ji, what's wrong?" Ah Hao looked at him nervously and asked. "Nothing." Gon Juanji shook his head, let go of his hand, drank a mouthful of wine, and laughed. "Illusion, illusion. Maybe I've been at home for too long." The palpitating feeling came and went quickly. Gon Juanji thought he was mistaken. He did not have any heart problems, so he was naturally very calm. "Give me another glass of Angel's Kiss." Gon Juanji smacked his lips and finished the glass of ice and fire. He felt that it was not so satisfying, so he waved his hand and greeted Ah Hao. "Brother Ji, drinking so much, will it affect your performance later?" The bartender Ah Hao would not refuse money. He just kindly reminded him, but the movement of his hands did not stop. "How can it be? You dare to underestimate your brother Ji's drinking capacity?" Gon Juanji knocked on the table and said with dissatisfaction. "No, of course not." The bartender, Ah Hao, handed the wine over and said with a smile. After drinking this glass, Gon Juanji also felt a little tipsy. He did not try to be brave and ran to the dance floor to play. Dance, sweat a little, and the alcohol will evaporate later. Gon Juanji, who has been on the battlefield for a long time, is familiar with it. He did not know how long he played, but there were more and more people and the atmosphere was getting hotter and hotter, but it was far from the most lively time. Gon Juanji was sweating, but he returned to the bar in high spirits. "Refreshing!" Gon Juanji shouted. He was grounded for a few days and he was full of anger. Now he vented some of it. "Brother Ji, the white-collar beauties are here." The bartender, Ah Hao, winked at him and smiled. Chapter 9:15. Come on, let's drink. I'll cover all the expenses of the beauties today. Appearing as a rich and handsome man, Gon Juanji quickly sat in the booth of the 3 white-collar beauties. He even waved his hand and said very generously. Under the shining laser lights of the nightclub, Gon Juanji felt that the 3 beauties were not bad. After makeup, their lips were flaming red, and the main thing was that their bodies were hot enough. If he could have sex with 1, 2, or even 3 at the same time, it would be really good. Not far away, the bartender Hao shook his head and sighed. Women nowadays don't love themselves. As he played with the mixing glass, he thought funny in his heart. Forget it, they don't care. Why are you worried about them? Isn't this world just about looks and money? Just as the bartender Ah Hao was feeling sorry for himself, the booth that Gon Juanji had just walked into suddenly became chaotic. 3 women in low-V white-collar attire with pale faces stumbled out from inside. "Someone's dead! Someone's dead!" They screamed in horror. A few people who had just come out of the dance floor and were about to take a rest at the side curiously looked into the booth. The booth was originally just surrounded by 2 higher sofas and was not sealed at all. They immediately saw the situation inside. As soon as they saw it, they also panicked. They pulled their companions and ran. In a panic, they didn't know where to go and even bumped into other people. They also shouted, "Someone's dead! Run!" The already noisy nightclub became even noisier. When the bartender Hao saw the situation over there, he was surprised and called a few people who were guarding the venue to check the situation. "What's the situation? Why are you running?" A guy with a tattoo on his arm grabbed a white-collar woman who was running away in a panic and asked, "Someone's dead. He's not breathing. It's none of my business." The woman's tears flowed out. She struggled desperately, and her high heels fell off on the ground. The bartender Hao recognized this woman. Although the powder on her face was washed into a mess by tears, she was one of the white-collar women that the rich young man had just walked over to hook up with. His heart skipped a beat. The bartender Hao said to the guy, "Brother Wolf, something seems to have happened. Catch this woman and see what's going on first." The bartender, Ah Hao, and the rest of the guys rushed to the booth where the incident happened. When they went in to take a look, they saw a man lying on the sofa with a pale face. His hands were grabbing the clothes on his chest, and he was curled up into a ball. When Ahau and the others came over, that person was already motionless. Brother Ji, the bartender, Ahau, took a deep breath and shouted in horror. That's right. The man lying on the sofa like a dead man was the high-spirited Gon Juanji. No, he wasn't dead. He's already dead. A bold worker came over and checked his breathing. He shook his head and said, "Let's inform Big Brother and see how we should deal with this." A worker said, "I don't think so. His family is very rich. Even the Gon family in West Bridge is not someone our Big Brother dares to mess with. Let's call the police. The most important thing is to get rid of us." Bartender Ahau said anxiously. The worker nodded with a serious expression and said to the others, "You guys tell the boss and then call the police. Also, keep an eye on that woman. Don't let her slip away. Actually, I think that his death might have nothing to do with us. Look at his hand." Bartender Ahau muttered to him, "It's probably a heart attack. He seemed to have a problem when he came just now." The nightclub was in chaos. Poplar Fruit didn't know about it. At that time, he reached out and transferred his internal force into Gon Juanji's heart. He condensed his internal force into a liquid state and used a special method to maintain it for a period of time. When he was in Sweden, he had tried it on small insects. This special method could allow his internal force to be maintained for about 9 hours after it left his body. At around 8:30, this seal would completely lose its effect. After the seal lost its effect, the internal force that left the poplar fruit's body would disappear and disperse between heaven and earth. Unless it was deliberately done by the poplar fruit, this internal force would not have any healing effect on others. Otherwise, the poplar fruit would not be practicing martial arts but a medical machine. Not only that, this internal force was invisible to the inner eye and could not be detected by instruments, but it had a strong effect on the human body. When the liquid internal force that the poplar fruit had hidden in Gon Juanji's body was about to dissipate, it had to first transform into a gaseous state and then spread out. This speed was very fast, and it did not give people time to react at all. Although it was small, not necessarily bigger than a dust particle, the strong expansion effect was enough to make Gon Juanji's cardiovascular system explode. If his cardiovascular system exploded, only death would await him. Moreover, it would be a sudden death. It would not give Gon Juanji a chance to save himself or even call for help. Regardless of whether it succeeded or not, the poplar fruit had already planted this seed at noon. Although he was slightly nervous, in the small auditorium, the person that people saw was still the humorous, witty, and talkative big boy. Time ticked by. Kiki, who was below the stage, could no longer fight against sleepiness. She fell asleep in the arms of Sister Bebe, wrapped in clothes. The poplar fruit speech was gradually coming to an end. Poplar Fruit said with emotion, "Many people say that I have achieved great things, and many students also regard me as an idol or a star. In fact, Poplar Fruit is just like the students here, an ordinary student at Higashiyama University." The audience began to clap. Poplar Fruit pressed his hands down to stop them from clapping. He had not finished speaking yet. In Sweden, teacher Mo Yen once said, "I am a storyteller. Because of my storytelling, I won the Nobel Prize in Literature. In fact, today I am just like teacher Mo Yen. I am just a storyteller. Today, I am standing in front of everyone to tell you the interesting stories that have happened on my academic path. Of course, I am not telling you these stories to teach you life philosophy. Poplar Fruit is not qualified to be everyone's sole teacher." Poplar Fruit smiled. The audience chuckled in response. "I just hope that you will be able to obtain happiness while listening to these stories. In other words, you will discover that there are still many interesting and novel experiences on the path of learning," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "Learn happily, grow happily, and then walk happily into the world outside the ivory tower." The audience began to clap. However, Poplar Fruit stopped them once again. This time, everyone looked at him in confusion. "The applause means that my speech is over. After that, you will all leave the stage. If you don't hear the next news, I am afraid that you will suffer a great loss," Poplar Fruit said with a bright smile. Below the stage, there was some discussion and some laughter. Poplar Fruit smiled. When I was in Sweden, the school gave me a mission. I had to invite teacher Mo Yen, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, back to share his experience with everyone. I also passed this request to teacher Mo Yen. He paused. The audience was already quiet. Everyone took a deep breath and looked at him excitedly, as if they were waiting for him to say the good news that was on the verge of coming out. Poplar Fruit did not keep them in suspense. He said in a clear voice, "Here, I can tell everyone. Teacher Mo Yen has given me a clear answer. When school reopens next year, he will choose a time to come to our school to give a speech. So, everyone, please look forward to it." Poplar Fruit's final words were drowned out by the excited applause of the students. Chapter 9:16. The next day was the weekend. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei didn't have classes. The weather was good, so the family went shopping and bought some things. In the evening, they went to Fong Beibei's house for dinner. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Fong Beibei took Poplar Fruit's hand and asked with a smile, "Uncle, what gift are you going to give me?" "Gift? Kiki wants a gift." Chi-Chi, who was tightly wrapped up, heard elder sister Bei mention a present in a daze. She immediately became happy and pulled down the large scarf covering her mouth, revealing her red, pouty little mouth as she started to cry out. "Well," Poplar Fruit scratched his head, pretending to be hesitant. Fong Beibei immediately glanced over, stamped her feet, and said suspiciously, "Don't tell me you forgot this? How could it be?" Poplar Fruit raised his voice and laughed. He rubbed Fong Beibei's head and said intimately, "I can forget anything but this. I've already prepared a gift. Kiki also has one, but Kiki's is a Christmas gift. I can't tell you in advance. Otherwise, you won't have the feeling of opening the gift." "So mysterious," Fong Beibei muttered. In fact, she was very happy because this was the first time that Poplar Fruit prepared a gift for her in advance. "Papa, what's the Christmas gift?" Kiki asked curiously. She saw that her father didn't look at her. She pulled her father's ear and repeated this sentence like a repeater. Although Kiki was wearing gloves and it didn't hurt her father's ear, she was very noisy. Poplar Fruit had to explain to Kiki, "Christmas gift, it starts with Christmas." When the family went shopping and bought clothes, Poplar Fruit told Kiki about Santa Claus who would come from the sky in a sleigh pulled by sick deer at night, and Christmas gifts and socks when she woke up, and other fairy tales made Kiki happy. However, there was a debate about Poplar Fruit on the internet. The reason for this debate was the news that was uploaded early in the morning. The first heir of the Gon family in Yongqing City suddenly died of myocardial infarction in XXX nightclub. People were talking about how this young Master Gon was smoking, drinking, and flirting with women before he died. Did this guy do something in the nightclub, then suddenly died on a woman's belly? Of course, the media soon cited the police investigation to clarify this matter. There was no such thing as XXX in the nightclub. After the autopsy, it was determined that he died of excessive smoking and drinking which caused his heart to overload. However, not only were the audience dissatisfied, some non-official media also didn't want to minimize the matter. They dug deeper to see if there was any more shocking news. They didn't expect that, with such digging, young Master Gon's background and character would be exposed in front of the people. Rich second generation likes to show off his wealth, likes to race, likes to go to nightclubs, and changes women like changing clothes. Anyway, as long as it was a rich second generation's fault, this young Master Gon had it. There was even news that he took a high school student to have an abortion. Many netizens angrily commented, "Scum! He deserved to die. God is watching what people do." At this time, a netizen suddenly pointed out in surprise, "This young Master Gon, isn't he that bastard Gon Juanji who splashed dirty water on Weibo at the beginning of the month?" This was still considered a true fan. Not a true fan happily pointed out, "This man has played with so many women. I don't know if Poplar Fruit's girlfriend has been played with before." Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's fans immediately fought back. "Play your sister." Poplar Fruit already said that Fong Beibei's first love was unworthy, but they hadn't developed to that point yet. No matter who won the argument, a netizen made a shocking discovery that changed the topic of discussion about Ganjuanji on the internet. First, Qin Shueishui, who previously hyped up poplar fruit, was arrested by the police for drug possession and suspected of drug trafficking. Now, Ganjuanji, who also slandered poplar fruit on the internet, is also in trouble. It's a serious matter and he's dead. This discovery was immediately forwarded. Some netizens joked, "Sai, this is really strange. Could it be that if you provoke this poplar fruit, you might die without knowing why? Dear, you're in big trouble. If you dare to expose poplar fruit on the internet, be careful not to die an unnatural death." The netizens caused a ruckus on the internet. They actually didn't take it that seriously. They just found a topic that could be used as a topic to talk about after a meal, and were in a good mood. However, some people who thought they were Sherlock Holmes or Conan started to search for news about poplar fruit and were surprised. Did you find anything? Poplar fruit has only been back for 2 days, and he went straight back to Yangcheng, the same city as Ganjuanji. He had just returned, and this enemy was already dead. Do you think there's something fishy going on here? Maybe it was poplar fruit who killed him. That's possible. I have an interview with the new generation martial arts student, Che Enjuan. A netizen quoted a screenshot of the news and said reasonably, "Didn't Che Enjuan say that poplar fruit's kung fu was better than his?" In an instant, conspiracy theories became synonymous with online discussions. There were even netizens who wanted the police to investigate poplar fruit. It's him, he's the murderer. If poplar fruit didn't go shopping and stayed at home to browse the internet, he would definitely be shocked by the netizens. His imagination was really running wild. Even a blind guess could guess the truth. At this time, some students from Higashiyama University couldn't stand it anymore. They found a video of poplar fruit speech recorded by the Higashiyama University Student Union and uploaded it to the internet. Who said that poplar fruit is the murderer? Stand up. I can tell you clearly that last night when that scumbag Ganjuanji died, our poplar fruit was giving a speech to us. There were hundreds of people present who can testify for him. If you weren't there, please tell me how poplar fruit killed him. Using his mind to kill? Please don't joke with me, okay? In this world, no one would be able to guess how poplar fruit killed Ganjuanji without spilling a drop of blood, unless there really was a deity who came down to earth and caught evidence of poplar fruit using his internal energy to cheat. Poplar fruit didn't say anything about this incident on the internet. Even when he went to the Fong family and his parents talked about it, he and Fong Beibei just sighed and didn't mention that person again. At this time, people's attention was slowly being diverted by 2 things on the internet. The first thing was poplar fruit's speech. The video of his speech was spread because of this incident. This made people who liked poplar fruit even more. Our Appa is so talented. It also made people who didn't know poplar fruit gradually understand poplar fruit. This young man has the talent to be a speaker. The second thing was the upcoming Christmas Day. This Christmas Day had a special meaning. In front of them, people had just passed the hotly discussed 2012, December 21st, 2012. Behind them, they were welcoming a new life and the most festive and lively Western festival. How did poplar fruit and the others spend it? Chapter 9:17. Kiki, help Daddy pick up that small ball. Before poplar fruit's voice fell, a white and tender little hand holding a small golden plastic ball in front of him. Turning his head, he saw Kiki standing there with an excited look on her face. It turned out that the little fellow was already ready to help her father. Just now, when the small ball was not firmly hung and fell to the ground, Kiki immediately pounced on it with her but sticking out. The Christmas tree is so small. Chi-Chi bounced around her father's side and chattered with him. At this moment, her mood was as excited as a mountain child who had climbed over a mountain and seen the beautiful sea. It's as tall as Kiki. Kiki jumped to the opposite side of poplar fruit, shaking her little butt, giggling, and gestured to herself. Because our family can't buy a bigger Christmas tree, poplar fruit said with a smile. By such a big Christmas tree, where should we put it? He bought the Christmas tree just to adjust the festive atmosphere. unlike in foreign countries, where Christmas trees and roast turkeys were regarded as symbols of Christmas. Put it in Kiki's bed. Kiki rolled her eyes, then clapped her little hands and happily said, "That way? Santa Claus can give Kiki a lot of gifts. You wish." Poplar Fruit smiled and pinched Kiki's little nose. He handed the golden ball to Kiki and said, "Come, Kiki, help Daddy hang it." And then, Chi-Chi likes to help Papa the most. The little fellow did not forget to take credit for her work. She took it, stood on her tiptoes, and wanted to follow her father to hang the small ball. However, she seemed to be unable to find the key point. The curious Goldie wagged its tail and walked over. It wriggled and wriggled between Chi-Chi and the Christmas tree. Then it pushed Chi-Chi away. This way, Chi-Chi could not hang on the little golden ball. "Aya, Daddy, Goldie is making trouble. It won't help Kiki with Daddy's work." Kiki pouted, pointed at Goldie and complained. Goldie wagged its tail, moved its head closer, and intimately licked Kiki's finger. As a result, Kiki suddenly squatted down and pushed away Goldie, who only came to please its master. Although Kiki was young, her strength was not small at all. In terms of strength, Goldie was no match for her at all. Poplar Fruit smiled and helped Kiki hold down the innocent Goldie, and let Kiki try to hang the golden ball on the Christmas tree. When Kiki hung herself, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Her eyes became crescent moons, and she jumped up and down holding her father's hand. She pointed at the Christmas tree and said, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, look, Kiki, hang the ball at the highest point." Poplar Fruit held his daughter's face, kissed her forehead, and said with a smile, "Kiki is great. Come, let's hang these little balls and little stars up with Daddy." When the father and daughter were almost done decorating the Christmas tree, Fong Beibei also came back. She just went to school in the morning and did not go to class. She just reviewed in the library. She was different from Poplar Fruit. No matter how Poplar Fruit took the exam, he was almost guaranteed to pass the final exam. Fong Beibei, on the other hand, had to seize the time to review. English, Mahjong, and other disgusting non-professional subjects gave her a headache. Even if Poplar Fruit tutored her, she still had to do the questions and memorize the books. "Wow, you finished assembling the Christmas tree so quickly?" Fong Beibei asked with a smile. "Kiki, tell me, who decorated the Christmas tree so beautifully?" Fong Beibei asked this question, but in fact, the answer was already known. When Kiki was helping, Poplar Fruit secretly took a photo, and not only did he post it on Weibo, but he also sent it to Fong Beibei. "It's Kiki." Kiki happily ran out and raised her little hand to ask for praise. She was also afraid that Sister Beibei could not see it, so she jumped high and repeated these 3 words. "Wow, Kiki is so smart and awesome." Fong Beibei gave 2 thumbs up and praised Kiki with a smile. At this time, Kiki was a little shy. She said bashfully, "There's also Papa." Goldie wagged its tail and walked up from behind. Kiki noticed it and immediately complained, "There's no Goldie. Goldie is a troublemaker." After playing with Kiki for a while, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei went to the kitchen to prepare tonight's dinner. Fong Beibei also bought vegetables when she came back. "Uncle, do you think we should invite other people over for Christmas?" Fong Beibei pretended to ask casually while picking vegetables. "Well, you want to invite Shanshan and the others, right?" Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. "Then I'll buy more vegetables tomorrow. Tell me how many people will come first." "Not them," Fong Beibei said. "Not them? Then who else?" Poplar Fruit asked, "Mosquito and Enlon? I forgot to tell you. They went to Harbor City to watch the fireworks. They are not in Yangcheng." "Watch the fireworks? So romantic?" Fong Beibei said casually, "I'm not talking about them." "Huh." Poplar Fruit really didn't understand what Fong Beibei was up to. Fong Beibei's voice was very low. She didn't dare to raise her head and look at Poplar Fruit, Sister Zhang Yujie. Poplar Fruit was a little confused when he heard Fong Beibei say this name. On the day when he came back, he saw Zhang Yujie and Fong Beibei together. He thought that Mars was going to collide with the Earth. Fortunately, after they talked about it, Fong Beibei didn't mention her again. Zhang Yujie had just taken over New Translation Road Publishing House, and it happened that it was almost the end of the year. She was so busy that she didn't have time to talk to Poplar Fruit. So, it seemed that the storm had subsided. However, Poplar Fruit really underestimated the vigilance between women. Why did you call her? Poplar Fruit asked with a headache. Shouldn't we be celebrating Christmas on our own? You just said it's okay. Fong Beibei raised her head, her eyes somewhat evasive as she said, Is she that special? Although she was avoiding his eyes, her tone was firm. She wanted Poplar Fruit to give her an answer. Poplar Fruit was speechless. No matter how low his EQ was, he knew what was going on. Poplar Fruit shook his head and continued to deal with the plucked chicken. Okay. I know you're still a little unhappy. Stop it. Didn't we talk about it last time? You can't be jealous anymore. I just think that she's all alone in Yangcheng. Fong Beibei shrunk her head. She knew that Poplar Fruit was a little angry, but she couldn't help but mutter a few words. If you say it again, I'll spank your butt tonight. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, And I'll spank you with your pants off. Do you know what it's called tonight? Uncle, you're so evil. Fong Beibei said angrily. She patted the water and smiled as she sprinkled some water on Yang Gua. This time she didn't make a fuss. She knew Poplar Fruit's temper and bottom line. Actually, she's not alone in Yangcheng. Poplar Fruit thought for a while and explained, her dad also works in Yangcheng, so you don't have to worry about her. Chapter 9:18. Normally, they should go to a restaurant outside for a romantic Christmas Eve, but Fong Beibei said that eating outside in a restaurant was not as warm as eating at home. Poplar Fruit thought that it was quite reasonable. Now that it was cold outside, Fong Beibei would rather stay at home if she didn't have to go to school. Let's have a candlelight dinner tonight. Poplar Fruit found the candlestick and long red candles that he bought yesterday, lit 2 of them and placed them on the table. I'll turn off the light. Fong Beibei took off her apron and casually hung it on the back of the chair. She trotted to turn off the light, and with a burst of bell-like laughter, all the lights in the room went out at once. Oh, where's Papa? Kiki is scared. Kiki was just playing in the living room when she suddenly couldn't see her fingers. The little girl instinctively hugged Gold, who was lying next to her, and cried out in fear. In fact, there were 2 flickering candlelight in the room, but the human eye had a certain delay reaction. After the bright incandescent light went out, it would take a while for the human eye to adapt. Here, Sister Beibei is here. Without waiting for Poplar Fruit to answer, Fong Beibei trotted to Kiki and hugged her. She was in a good mood. Compared to just now, Fong Beibei returned to the lively and lovely girl that a young girl should be. In fact, it was not difficult to understand why Fong Beibei was a little narrow-minded with Poplar Fruit just now. Zhang Yujie gave her too much pressure at the airport, and even almost broke her self-confidence. Although Poplar Fruit promised her that he would not change his mind, she still felt a little uncertain in her heart. Fong Beibei was also sensible. She knew that Poplar Fruit's translation career was very important. She did not dare to suggest that Poplar Fruit cut off contact with Zhang Yujie, who was the boss of Poplar Fruit. She was also afraid that Poplar Fruit would think that she was too spoiled and would not like her. Therefore, even though she felt uneasy, Fong Beibei was only jealous to the extent that Poplar Fruit could tolerate. She wanted to make Poplar Fruit understand her feelings. Of course, there was also the intention of acting coquettishly and asking for a hug. Be careful. Don't fall down yourself. Poplar Fruit reminded him with a smile. He put away his and Fong Beibei's aprons, washed his hands, and prepared to eat. After adapting to the candlelight, Kiki was finally not afraid. She did not need Sister Beibei to hug her. She asked to sit in her own exclusive seat so that she could have more freedom. Kiki, don't touch it. Fong Beibei shouted and reached out to stop Kiki's little hand that was reaching for the candle. Sister Beibei, what is this? Kiki asked curiously. This is a candle, Fong Beibei said with a smile. Suddenly, Kiki pouted her little mouth and said, Sister Beibei is lying. Candles are not like this. Candles are so small. Blow out the candles and eat the cake. The little girl also gestured with her little finger. Her tone was very sure. This is also a candle, a bigger candle. Poplar Fruit smiled and touched his daughter's head, then continued to pick up the chopsticks and spoon for Kiki's favorite dishes. Blow out the candles and eat the cake. Kiki cried out happily. She pouted her little mouth and blew, making the candlelight sway. It was very beautiful. Don't make trouble. Where is the cake? Poplar Fruit smiled and pushed the candlestick away. Otherwise Kiki could reach it. He said, "Today is not your birthday. When it's your birthday, Dad will buy you a big cake." No, Kiki said disappointedly. She was a little depressed. Fong Beibei reached out to Kiki's hand and said with a smile, "Kiki, it's okay. Hurry up and eat. Then go back to your room to see if the socks are hung up properly. Today, after Kiki falls asleep, Santa Claus will come to give Kiki a present." Oh, Santa Claus! Kiki remembered, and her eyes suddenly lit up. She could not wait to twist her slender waist and shout, "Kiki is going to have a present." Yes, and there are two. Fong Beibei turned to look at Poplar Fruit, and the two of them looked at each other and smiled. With Kiki causing trouble, this candlelight dinner was not very romantic. However, it was full of warmth and joy. After coaxing Kiki, who wanted to wait for Santa Claus, to sleep, Poplar Fruit walked out and sat down beside Fong Beibei. "Where's the present?" Fong Beibei did not hesitate in front of Poplar Fruit. She sat up on her knees and stretched out her white palm with a smile. There was not much sun this year, and Fong Beibei's skin was much fairer than before. Of course, it was not that she did not look good before. White and tender had its beauty, and wheat-colored skin had its charm. Looking away from his girlfriend's hand, Poplar Fruit smiled and said to Fong Beibei, "What? Can't wait? If you don't send me off, Christmas Eve will be over." Fong Beibei said with a pout. Okay. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "Close your eyes first." Okay. Fong Beibei obediently closed her eyes. However, she felt uncomfortable kneeling, so she raised her butt and changed to a cross-legged position. She raised her head and looked expectant. Poplar Fruit seemed to have walked 2 steps and turned back. He smiled and said, "You can open your eyes now." Fong Beibei expectantly opened her eyes. She saw red in front of her. She tilted her head back and saw 2 big red apples. Why are they apples?" Fong Beibei said with some disappointment. "Don't you like apples?" Poplar Fruit pretended to pick up the apples and looked at them. He asked with some regret, "Aren't you supposed to give me apples on Christmas Eve?" "It's not that I don't like it. It's just that, in fact, this apple is also very good. One for you and one for me. Well, it's very beautiful." Fong Beibei was afraid that Poplar Fruit would be unhappy. She quickly took the apple and looked at it, trying to convince herself that she liked this gift. "Well, why don't you take a look at this apple?" When Fong Beibei lowered her head, Poplar Fruit took out a box with a smirk and put it in front of her eyes. "Ha!" Fong Beibei was still somewhat unable to extricate herself from the contradictory emotions. She looked at the box in confusion. After a long time, she still couldn't figure out the relationship between them. Poplar Fruit didn't explain. He just looked at her with a smile. "Oh, Uncle, you're so bad. You lied to me." Fong Beibei finally reacted. She patted Poplar Fruit's arm in surprise and took the box in Poplar Fruit's hand. "Why did you give me a phone?" After Fong Beibei opened the gift box, she took out the new iPhone 5 that Poplar Fruit put in it and asked puzzledly, "Because this way we can use the same phone." Poplar Fruit smiled and took out the iPhone 5 that was exactly the same as Fong Beibei's. This phone was only released in the second half of this year. Hee, a couple's phone. Fong Beibei took Poplar Fruit's phone and then leaned on Poplar Fruit's arms to fiddle with it. Fong Beibei didn't have an iPhone, but she still often played with Poplar Fruit's phone, so she wasn't unfamiliar with the operating system. Poplar Fruit put his chin on Fong Beibei's head, his hands around her waist. He looked at Fong Beibei's smiling face as she raised the phone, and the two took a photo together. "This is our lock screen wallpaper. You're not allowed to change it." Fong Beibei raised the two phones and said to Poplar Fruit with a smile. Chapter 919. In the end, nothing happened on Christmas Eve. Poplar Fruit was still able to control himself. Furthermore, his parents had mentioned this matter several times, and Fong Beibei did not have any intention of breaking through prematurely. Therefore, the night passed very peacefully. In fact, the relationship between the two had already reached the point where they could see each other with sincerity. Everything that needed to be done had been done, and only the last line of defense was left. However, from the looks of it, the breakthrough of this line of defense was just around the corner. After Christmas Eve, it was Christmas Day. The happiest person on Christmas Day was still Kiki. She received her presents early in the morning, and the two presents were opened so quickly that confetti covered the floor. After that, she asked her father to bring her to Chimelong Amusement Park to play for the entire morning. As Fong Beibei had to revise, they returned in the afternoon. Kiki loves Christmas the most. After the little fellow returned, her excitement did not diminish as she chirped. "Isn't your favorite birthday the most?" Poplar Fruit teased her. That's right. The little fellow was in a dilemma. She stood in the same place, scratching her head as she thought about it. It seemed that it was very difficult for her to choose. That's still my favorite birthday. There's cake to eat on my birthday. In the end, Chi-Chi reluctantly ranked them in order. Holding her father's hand, she didn't really care at all. She commented seriously, "Christmas is Chi-Chi's second favorite." At this time, Higashiyama University had fully entered the revision week. In another 2 weeks, it would be the exam week. Therefore, not only was Fong Beibei busy, Poplar Fruit's New Dimension Society was also beginning to wrap up work. In the next few days, they would be conducting online long-distance end-of-term exams for the children to test the learning effects of this semester. Of course, the long-distance education did not end at the end of the semester. As long as the children were willing, there would still be some enthusiastic teachers, including Poplar Fruit, to stay behind during the winter break to give them preferential treatment. However, the study during the break was not compulsory, and the children could choose to come or not. In addition, Poplar Fruit was still planning to bring Fong Beibei, Kiki, and the current executive chairman of the society, Wang Yuba, as well as Lin Xingshan, who was the best teacher of the semester, to Xiong Family Village to interact with the children. Of course, he was not going there to join in the New Year's fun, nor was he thinking of bringing the children to see the outside world. This idea, after the discussion of the society's backbone, they decided to do it during the summer break. The reason why he wanted to go to Xiong Family Village was mainly because Poplar Fruit also needed to do a half-year evaluation with Meng Ping to make a summary report on the results of his long-distance education. Meng Ping told him that if he applied for it from the province, the next semester, the long-distance education would be fully implemented in Lidong County. It would benefit 6 towns, 16 remote mountain villages, and more than 4,000 poor students who could not go to school or whose education level was too low. Of course, this was only for primary school. Junior high education was not something that Poplar Fruit could afford with dozens of university students who had not received proper teacher training. After doing some calculations, Poplar Fruit had spent about 2 million yuan to set up classrooms and equipment for more than 300 children in Xiong Family Village. Now, it was more than 10 times that amount. That meant that he had to spend nearly 30 million yuan. Poplar Fruit was not worried about not having enough money this time, because Meng Ping told him that the government would not let Poplar Fruit use all of his money. If all of it was used by private or charitable organizations to support the poverty alleviation education in a county, wouldn't the government lose face? He would fight for the education funds and at least get half of the cost. In this way, if Poplar Fruit's long-distance education charity fund was only 10 million yuan, he could still afford it. Although when the fund was first set up, Poplar Fruit's own money and the donations from some of his foreign friends only amounted to about 30 million yuan, don't forget that Poplar Fruit's income from the copyright of New Translation Road was quite considerable. He had already donated more than 20 million yuan to the long-distance education charity fund, which was more than 60 to 70% of his income. Regardless of how selfless and noble Poplar Fruit was, the foundation with more than 50 million yuan was still considered a strong fund. Even if the number of poor students in Lidong County doubled, the fund was still enough to pay for all the children's education expenses. However, the upright Meng Ping stood from the perspective of the people and reminded Poplar Fruit, "You are cooperating with the government. If you don't want your money to be embezzled, and if you don't want the children's hopes to be dashed, you have to do your procurement properly. If the procurement is all handed over to the government personnel, embezzlement, and shoddy goods will definitely happen." Meng Ping had seen too many of these people in the impoverished Lidong County. Even after experiencing an anti-corruption storm, people were still greedy. After the investigation team left, didn't they still take what they wanted and take what they wanted? Meng Ping could guarantee that the Education Bureau under his control would not be in trouble. But he couldn't represent everyone, especially the Finance Bureau that was already in chaos. Every year, the education funds allocated by the higher-ups were not small, but after so many layers of exploitation, the Education Bureau did not have much. This time, Meng Ping even had to apply for a special fund to ensure that it would not be embezzled. Therefore, he needed Poplar Fruit's cooperation. Poplar Fruit was not stupid. He was very flexible in this aspect. After receiving Meng Ping's advice, Poplar Fruit began to think about how to use the money that would change the lives of poor children. The Distance Education Charity Fund he set up had to be transparent, open, and fair. Transparency and openness meant that the details of all the money spent, the whereabouts, and the implementation of the funds had to be listed on the website to ensure that everyone in the world could find it and maintain the supervision of the Distance Education Charity Fund. Being fair was not easy. At the very least, if the charity fund was controlled by one person, then there was no way to be fair. Poplar Fruit could not do it himself. He had to hand over this power and let more people participate, other than those with ulterior motives. Regardless of whether it was the appointment or dismissal of positions, some large expenditures also needed to be voted on. Of course, if it was just the Distance Education Charity Fund, it would not be enough to maintain its innocence. This was because it would not be able to prevent the corruption and influence of the government. Poplar Fruit needed to use the power of the public. In the quietly approaching 2013, Poplar Fruit needed to push distance education into the public's eyes and let everyone know about it. Only by putting this matter on the table and using the power of his millions of fans could he cut off the hands of those who had reached out to him. In 2013, Poplar Fruit had a long way to go. Chapter 920. Most of the time, plans could not keep up with changes, and the person who had broken Poplar Fruit's plans time and time again was the same person, Poplar Fruit's mentor, Chun Zongdai. Before the end of the semester, the old man called Poplar Fruit over. This semester, the old man was extremely satisfied with Poplar Fruit. The thesis that Poplar Fruit submitted at the end of last year could be said to have provided a programmatic explanation of the entire theory of translation. Although the theory of translation still needed to be perfected, Poplar Fruit's thesis had pretty much established his position in the field of translation theory. As for the preparation for the next semester, Poplar Fruit had also given the old man a satisfactory answer. Through several lectures at Sinda College, he had summed up valuable experience and accumulated a large number of lecture notes. After the school's evaluation and review, the old man told Poplar Fruit that in the next semester, Poplar Fruit would stop all substitute teaching work and focus on completing his own 2 public elective courses. Of these 2 public elective courses, the first one was Translation Theory and Practice. Theory was secondary, and practice was the main focus. Poplar Fruit would combine his own experience and lead the entire school, regardless of whether they were language majors or not, to practice actual translation. From the practice, they would experience and learn theoretical knowledge. The second course was called Basic Swedish. That's right, Poplar Fruit's public elective course did not teach other popular languages, but the recognized Poplar Fruit's strongest language, Swedish. In fact, Poplar Fruit's dozens of minor languages were very average. Even if he were to teach ancient Sanskrit, he would be able to handle it. However, Poplar Fruit's Swedish had been tested by the Nobel Prize in Literature Committee. The school also wanted to ride on the momentum of the Nobel Prize in Literature so that students would not stay away when they saw that it was a foreign language. However, could one learn a language well in one semester? That was impossible. Not everyone could be as crazy as Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit himself also felt that it was unreasonable to open a new language course in the public elective course. One had to know that everyone chose the public elective course based on their own interests. If they chose a course in this semester, they would not choose it again in the next semester. Fortunately, the school had also clearly told Poplar Fruit that this was only a test. If Poplar Fruit's teaching was indeed good, they would change this public elective course into an internal elective course within the outer court. It was even possible to open up a separate major for Poplar Fruit in the future. This was all for the future. It was still a bit ridiculous to open up a separate major for Poplar Fruit. After all, even the best scalper would die of exhaustion if he had to support a major by himself. Chun Zongdai called Poplar Fruit over today not to inform him of any changes in the next semester, but to inform him of two announcements. This is not a question. This is a notice. Chun Zongdai said firmly, no matter what you say, you have to go to Macau to participate in this language forum on March 4th. This is not only an event in China. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and some translation schools will also send representatives to participate. You are representing our school and our country. How can you just refuse? Teacher, do you have to make it sound so serious? Poplar Fruit smiled helplessly and said, Look, the notice says that it's from March 4th to 6th. But I really have something to do at this time. Chun Zongdai asked unhappily, what can't you put it aside for now? I remember that I told you about this forum not long after you came back from Bali. Okay, don't give me any excuses. You're not allowed to take a leave this time. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and said, No, teacher, March 6th is my girlfriend's birthday. Originally, I said that I would celebrate her birthday for her first time. I can't not be in Yangcheng on that day, right? Birthday is a small matter, but Feng Bei's disappointment is a big matter. Poplar Fruit promised her that he would spend every birthday with her in the future. I say, are you really stupid or are you pretending to be stupid? Chun Zongdai's tone sounded as if he expected better from him. He scolded, I think you are really stupid. You are so stubborn and don't know how to be flexible. Poplar Fruit touched his head. He was confused by the scolding. If you want to celebrate her birthday, can you only celebrate it in Yangcheng? If you go to Macau to participate in the forum, can't you bring her with you? Chun Zongdai was so angry at Poplar Fruit that he laughed. He threw a book at him and said, There's an event in the forum during the day, so you two can do whatever you want at night. That's right. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood. He also scolded himself for being stupid. Why didn't he think of this? Chun Zongdai laughed and said, It's just Macau. It's not that far. You can bring her to play and she can help take care of Kiki. Don't ask your assistant to help you take care of your child. This time, you can't bring your assistant with you. Hee. I'll discuss it with her when I get back. Poplar Fruit scratched his head embarrassedly. He returned the book and prepared to run away. He did not want to let the old man continue to ridicule him. Where are you in a hurry to go? We're not done yet. Chun Zongdai knocked on the table unhappily and shouted, What else? Poplar Fruit could only move his butt back. Next semester, you don't only have the task of 2 public courses. On my side, I also have to give you more responsibilities. Otherwise, when you take 3 years of master's and doctorate, others will gossip that I let you in through the back door. Chun Zongdai said, Generally speaking, if a student wants to study for a doctorate, they have to go through 4 years of undergraduate studies, 2 to 3 years of graduate studies, and 3 or more years of doctorate, a total of more than 9 years. Language graduate students generally take 2 years, so it's relatively faster. The masters and doctorates are for those students who have good results in the postgraduate examination. However, according to the regulations, it also takes 5 years to complete the degree. The fastest is the masters and doctorates for medical students. They can get a doctorate in 8 years. Of course, the hardships are unknown to ordinary people. Poplar Fruit is a special case. With his own ability, it's not a problem to directly give him a doctorate. However, China's system is more rigid. It must be done step by step for so many years to get a certificate. Chen Zongdai reducing it to 3 years is already skirting the law. It's easy to be questioned by others. Fortunately, Chen Zongdai believes in Poplar Fruit's ability. As long as he proves everything with his ability, he believes that no one will revoke Poplar Fruit's doctorate after 3 years. Poplar Fruit has published 2 heavyweight papers in his first semester. It's obvious that Chen Zongdai has begun to build a foundation for him that others can't find fault with. Next semester, Beijing Foreign Studies University will send people over for an exchange. The leader is Luo Lin, someone you know. When Chen Zongdai said these words, there was still a hint of disdain. This is his own pride. When the time comes, you don't have to hide anything. Do what you have to do. Let them see the foundation of Higashiyama University. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Teacher, weren't you worried that Professor Luo would take our credit?" "Bullshit. I'm worried about him?" Chen Zongdai jumped up as if someone stepped on his foot. "It's that old man who is cunning. It's okay. Now that your paper has been published, no one can take your credit. Show them generously and let them study together. Our Higashiyama University is the top university in Guangdong Province. You have to have the bearing of a senior colonel, understand?" Poplar Fruit snickered and didn't answer. Chapter 921. How far is it? Why do I feel that we can't reach the end of this mountain road? Wang Yuba's tenacity was not as good as Lin Xingshan's. Halfway up the mountain, he was panting and complaining. "It's not far. Just a quarter of an hour, a little more and we'll be there." Xiong Jisher, who was next to him, smiled and asked in very ordinary Mandarin, "Can you do it? Do you want me to help you?" Now, many children on the mountain were fluent in Mandarin after learning from the students and teachers of Higashiyama University. Xiong Jisher, who had not received much education, had been left far behind by the children. He had just asked Poplar Fruit if he could join in the learning. When Poplar Fruit came this time, the people of Xiong village were very happy. 4 or 5 strong men came down to help with the luggage. Wang Yuba climbed the mountain empty-handed, but he was so tired. It seemed that he had not exercised enough. Didn't he see that Poplar Fruit and Xiong Jisher were walking as if they were walking on flat ground? Their faces were not red and they were not panting. Wang Yuba looked at Lin Xingshan, who was walking with Fang Beibei. Although the 2 girls were panting, they could still hold on. As a man, he could not make a fool of himself in front of girls, especially when he was still chasing Lin Xingshan. It was fine if he did not show his heroic spirit, but how could he be worse than a girl? "No, I can do it." Wang Yuba gritted his teeth and continued to walk forward. The air on the mountain was very cold. Although it was not snowing, it was only a few degrees. The whistling mountain wind was always drilling into the neck, which made people feel very uncomfortable. The climate was more difficult than when Poplar Fruit came in summer. "I heard from the children that there is no heating or air conditioning on the mountain. They can only freeze in winter." Lin Xingshan panted and said to Fang Beibei, "It's very pitiful. We have clothes. We are very strong. We often go up and down the mountain. We are not afraid of the cold." Xiong Jisher quickly explained. Poplar Fruit patted Xiong Jisher's shoulder with a smile and said, "That's not a reason. The conditions of the children are indeed difficult. I felt it the last time I came." However, Poplar Fruit was not a savior. He could not raise the living standards of the entire mountain stronghold to that of the city. Moreover, the government had put in a lot of effort to help the poor. According to Xiong Jiwu, there were people who came to help the poor this year. Every family received a few hundred yuan subsidy. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. "This year, I'll bring a few computers to the meeting hall of the stronghold." Poplar Fruit said, "You young people should learn how to surf the internet and get in touch with the outside world. See if it's possible to set up an online shop to sell the handicrafts or local specialties of our stockade. Let me tell you, the people outside like to buy these new things." Poplar Fruit did not know how to do business. so he could not give them more help. He could only provide them with the tools to find their own way out. It was like his long-distance education. It was better to teach a man how to fish than to give him a fish. He could not save all the people in the poor mountainous areas. He could only teach them knowledge and let them master the ability to save themselves. They were almost at the mountain stronghold. Kiki, who was wrapped in thick clothes along the way, saw the familiar grass and trees. She finally began to become active. She struggled in her father's arms and shouted to get down. There were only a few minutes left, and the mountain road here was much flatter. Poplar Fruit put Kiki down. Brother Xiaofeng, sister Xiaolin, big brother Anshuan. Before they even reached the entrance of the stronghold, Chi-Chi impatiently called out loudly to her little companions who were waiting for them at the entrance of the stronghold. She moved her short little legs and started running with a kick and a jump. Kiki, it's Kiki. The children of Xiong village were like a beehive that had exploded, making a lot of noise. Then they rushed over to Kiki. Kiki, we missed you so much. Like the bright moon surrounded by stars, Kiki was surrounded by the children. She did not know how many times this sentence was repeated. Kiki, why don't you come back to visit more often? Xiong Anshuan made a fuss, pulling Kiki's hand and jumping around. Xiong Xiaolin's eyes were filled with tears. Because she was studying in the county town, she could not come back for a long time, so she did not see Kiki much. When she saw Kiki, she rushed up and hugged her, crying. However, although she was crying, her mouth could not help but open into a smile. Gidge, Gidge. There were too many questions that Kiki could not hear clearly. She only felt happy, laughing loudly with so many brothers and sisters. The children's voices had cut through the tranquility of the mountain where Xiong village was located. It seemed to drive away the coldness of winter, making people feel warm in their hearts. Last summer, Kiki played with them on the mountain. They played like crazy boys. Poplar Fruit explained to Fong Beibei with a smile. Fong Beibei was very tired. Climbing the mountain was a challenge for her. Now she leaned on Poplar Fruit, panting, and did not have the strength to speak. Teacher Yang, Teacher Wang, Teacher Lin, and Teacher Fong are here too. My daughter could not squeeze in. She turned her head and saw the people behind her. She suddenly screamed. As a result, Wang Yuba and the other students and teachers who came up the mountain for the first time, who were about to collapse from exhaustion, truly felt the enthusiasm brought by the children. Compared to the reserved adults, these children were full of energy. It was as if they had never stopped talking, making people feel as if they were in a forest of hundreds of sparrows. Then, Lin Xingshan distributed the small gifts they had brought with them to the children. There were also letters written by the students and teachers of the New Dimension Society, which were filled with deep emotions. The children were so excited that tears welled up in their eyes. In fact, Wang Yuba was like Xiong Jiwu, leaning towards administration. However, when he faced the children, he was also motivated by Lin Xingshan. His words of encouragement that made people's blood boil successfully stimulated the children's enthusiasm for learning. Fong Beibei naturally did not need to be mentioned. She was born with an affinity for children. Very quickly, she played together with Kiki and a group of lower-grade children. Although it was very cold outside in winter and there was no way to play outdoor activities, Fong Beibei led them to play a number game that tested their reaction speed. This caused the children's laughter to fill the entire classroom. What about Poplar Fruit? Poplar Fruit did not accompany Fong Beibei and the rest to play with the children. He went to visit his first real martial arts master, Xiong Kahu. The old man's body was in good health. When he saw Poplar Fruit, he did not even greet him. Instead, he threw 2 Miaodao to Poplar Fruit and asked him to perform a set of knife techniques. He wanted to see if Poplar Fruit's martial arts had deteriorated during this period of time. Poplar Fruit's knife techniques had really deteriorated. His boxing skills had improved, but because he had not practiced the Miaodao for half a year, he was particularly unfamiliar with it. Poplar Fruit broke out in cold sweat. He braced himself and performed a set. Then, he looked at his master's frown and hurriedly explained, "Master, it's not that I've neglected my martial arts, but that I really can't find a place to practice. But don't worry, in 2 months, I'll move into a new house. There will be a place for me to practice my knife skills. Humph. People who practice martial arts never let their fists leave their hands. This attitude of yours is unacceptable. No matter what excuses Poplar Fruit came up with, Xiong Kahu was still dissatisfied in his heart. He gave Poplar Fruit a good beating. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.